now to the statement made just recently, in fact, a few moments ago, by the chairman of the Republican National Committee, Ed Gillespie.
One more update for you on the Electoral College tally with Alaska coming in. Senator John Kerry has 211 Electoral College votes. President George W. Bush now has 269 Electoral College votes. Hopefully we'll have one more update and then another guest speaker.
Funny guy. That's Ed Gillespie, the Republican National Committee chairman. They're really pushing the number a little more than NBC's experts are pushing in terms of the strength of the president's electoral position right now. Andrea.
Just talked to a top official within the Kerry campaign who says that they believe that there are enough provisional ballots out there that the actual final number in Ohio is narrow enough that they can make it up with the provisionals, and they are united in demanding and insisting that they will not concede Ohio.
In the meantime, right there.
I just heard through the magic of my ear that there's a whole carload of lawyers heading from Logan Airport as we speak to Ohio to try to litigate this thing and save it for Kerry. Let's go to Craig Crawford out there on the rink. Craig, we're looking at a dispute over how to read numbers that are already in, and that is the question is whether Cuyahoga County, not having met the normal level expected of it to win a statewide race and overcome the out of city vote. And now we're getting arguments about whether the backup ballots are going to be enough to overcome this. What's your sense of the numbers situation right now in Ohio?
My sense is that it's going to wind up close enough, Chris, that I believe the Kerry people, when they've just recently told me they have no intention of conceding Ohio. As a matter of fact, as you said, I just heard they have planes at Logan with lawyers ready to go to Ohio. If it's going to be that tight, they believe. They think that vote in Cleveland that's still coming in is going to get it so tight that a contesting of the election in Ohio is going to make sense, that it's going to be that close. Whether it's as close as 537 votes, we'll have to wait and see. But at least the way they're talking right now, unless somebody shuts them down, it sounds to me like we've got Ohio would be the Florida of 2004.
Why do we assume that the tally of provisional votes held by Democrats or that involve Democratic votes is superior to the number held by Republicans?
Well, I think, it's at this point we're going on a lot of boasting from both sides, and both sides have been pretty much right. I've been very impressed tonight, Chris, at the GOP turnout machinery they told us they had, and I was skeptical, I got to admit, but they've done it. And so both sides are saying they can duel to a draw on these provisional ballots, and nowadays I think I'm going to believe the Republicans when they say that.
Okay, stay right there, Craig. Let's go to Chris Jansen, who's in Cleveland. What's the reaction there to this claim by, or a statement of fact by the manager, the campaign manager for John Kerry, that they're going to contest this vote in Ohio? They don't think they've lost.
Just seconds ago, I talked to Bob Bennett, who is the GOP chairman here in Ohio, and he said to me, Chris, quote, "I'm not going to comment on someone making ridiculous statements. She has to show us the numbers from the State Board of Elections. 218,000 votes is the difference here in Cleveland. We've talked about the number tonight that the Democrats said if they could get 200,000 or better in a margin, they felt confident about winning Ohio. So I asked him, how do you make up 218,000 votes? He said they had very clear goals set in rural counties, also in the collar counties of the urban areas. He said in almost every case they exceeded our expectations. I said, how confident are you that this result will hold, that you believe George Bush has won the 20 electoral votes in Ohio? He said, the numbers may change, but the result will not change. I'm confident of that. Chris?
Okay, Chris Jansen, thanks for that report from Cleveland. So we have a standoff now tonight, or this morning. It's almost 2 o'clock on the East Coast, and the question has to be, are we going to have the normal ceremony that accompanies an apparent victory for the presidency? You're laughing. I guess we're not going to have
never again.
No more gentlemanly conduct, no more handing over the sword.
Here's the thing, though. I mean, I know a lot of Republicans out there are saying, why in the world
wouldn't John Kerry, if it appears obvious, why wouldn't John Kerry be a gentleman? Because you use the word gentlemanly, and concede this race if that in fact is what it's looking like. And the bottom line is he's fought a tough campaign and a long campaign. And I'll tell you what, he certainly owes it to all of his supporters to make sure that every single vote is counted. Now, of course, if the trends are breaking wildly against him, and if what we hear is the truth about these rural counties and these provisional ballots, now at that point, it's time to give up the ghost. But you know what? I mean, again, what time is it now? It's 15. It's 1:45. Big deal. You know what? This is a democracy.
By the way, there's an alternative route that is clearly laid out for us for a resolution to this campaign.
Right.
And that is through the Great Lakes. There are other states out there that will be decisive here. Because John Kerry is nowhere near 270.
Right. No, he'll win Michigan, though. Will he not? Will he not win Minnesota?
We don't know the middle part of the country.
George Bush is going to have to go over 290 before John Kerry concedes tonight. That is because 20 electoral votes represented by Ohio are not going to be counted by the Kerry campaign. So if George Bush adds it up by winning several other states, which is going to have to be Wisconsin, Nevada, New Mexico, maybe Iowa, some combination that gets him over 20.
Wisconsin and Minnesota, that's 20. If he throws in Iowa, that's 27.
Then it's over. But the question is, will the president go out and declare victory before Kerry is ready to concede? Based on what happened in Florida 4 years ago, the Bush campaign is going to be pressuring him to do that, to go out and say, look, just declare victory. The country's been watching all night. They see that you're ahead in Ohio. They see that they're going to wait for one more state to fall so that they're over 270. And then the pressure is going to be on for them to go out and declare victory.
He does in his car. He doesn't do that casually.
Right.
They call the photographers. They are
And it's all the symbolism.
The question is, does the Republican Party have the room tomorrow night, or do they have to have the party tonight? The concession speech tonight, can't they?
They want to do it tonight to lock it in, and we've already seen, as Andrew said, the motorcade coming down out of the Naval Observatory, heading toward the White House. They're starting to ramp up the ceremony.
Let me go to Hillary Rosen, because I think she's going to be fighting to the last dog dies. Hillary Rosen, give us a sense, if you can, of how hard the Kerry folk are going to fight before they give up on this one.
Well, I think they will fight, and I think they should fight. I think there's no reason to assume
what would be
that
an indication that they should turn over the sword? 3 more states, 2 more states?
What I hear from the Kerry campaign is that they think that they are running much stronger than Al Gore did in the Cleveland suburbs, and they have every reason to believe that those other ballots are going to come through, putting them ahead. And I think if you see Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan fall to the Kerry camp, it's going to be, it would be crazy for them to concede. And I agree with something Dee Dee said before, which is George Bush going out there and declaring victory while John Kerry and his people believe that they have not lost Ohio yet would be a terrible thing for the president to do. It would incite a lot of anger, a lot of division. If he was going to be winning another term, this would be the worst way for him to start it off. I think that the Bush campaign ought to be really careful right now.
So do you believe, Hillary, that there's the number of votes in Cuyahoga County, Democratic votes, sufficient to win this election?
I talked earlier to the folks from ACT America Coming Together, where they had the most unprecedented registration and turnout operation they've ever seen. Democratic registration, new registrants were 2-1 over Republicans. There's every reason to believe those votes are there.
Do they have 150,000 plurality coming out of the county, Hillary?
Well, I don't know. But I think that the folks who have spent the most time on the ground feeling confident gives me a reason to think that they ought to stick it out.
Okay, Hillary, let's go to Ron Silver. Your thoughts about this race as it gets to the short ends here?
This is the second election now. We may have all this litigation and last all this amount of time. And it reminds me of a comment that Pauline Kael made years ago when Nixon won the election. She says, I don't know how he won. I don't know a single person who voted for him. There is a group of people in this country that are so divorced from the heartland, they say something must be wrong. This can't possibly be. We don't know anybody who voted for the guy. Let it go. Let it go.
I remember Averell Harriman once saying, I don't know Jimmy Carter. None of my friends do either. How can he possibly be the Democratic nominee? Let me go right to John Fund. You're perhaps more used to these kinds of nights than some of the others here on the table. What do you think? I mean, is this going to be a question of waiting not for Cuyahoga County to get clear, but to wait for the Great Lakes states to give it to the president? And if they don't, we're here all night.
We're going to wait for the lawyers, Chris. John Kerry is not going to concede. I predicted
you don't need lawyers if he loses Michigan or Wisconsin and Minnesota. Then it's over anyway, right?
I think Kerry will carry Michigan. I think Kerry will carry Minnesota. I think John Kerry is going to set the doomsday machine of litigators loose. And here's the problem. Provisional ballots are counted after all the other ballots are counted. Both sides will know how many votes they need to win. Provisional ballots are each investigated individually. It can take over an hour per ballot, Chris. In Colorado, which is the only recent case we've had where provisional ballots decided an election, it took dozens of new temporary workers, hired specially for the occasion, using 3 different standards. Can you spell equal protection lawsuit? Using 3 different standards, it took them 35 days to count only 2,700 provisional ballots. Now, Bush's margin looks pretty good, and I'd have to say I disagree with Hillary. I don't think right now, if this margin holds up, there are enough provisional votes to affect the difference. But if it narrows, John Kerry is going to litigate each and every one of those provisional ballots. And notice how the 35 days in Colorado almost equals the 36 days we spent in Florida recounting.
I know, but more states metastasized. We got all these other states with the same problem. We're going to come back after this with some real live lawyers to talk about an election lawyers, the best we could find. They've been working for us tonight to try to litigate this ourselves and see whether it's not just a question of how many votes to count. It's a question of how do you count those votes. We'll be right back with that question answered for you. We're talking about the role that Ohio is playing now and how similar it may turn out to be to that of Florida 4 years ago, because the president may have well close to the 270 he needs to win in the Electoral College right now. He's up to 269, based to a large extent now on the call by NBC. We've called it at our network that the president has won Ohio. Let's go to Dan Abrams. Could this network be wrong, or is there something we're missing?
Well, look, I'm not going to tell you the network could be wrong, but I can tell you what would happen if there were legal fights in Ohio. Look, the issues would first and foremost be these provisional ballots. Remember, a federal court of appeal has already ruled that you have to have voted in the right precinct in order for your vote to count. Now, certainly they could try and continue to litigate that particular issue, but so far that issue appears to have been resolved, and that means that many of those provisional ballots would likely be disqualified. Then there's the possibility of a recount. Can you imagine another recount? In Ohio, you get an automatic recount if it's within 0.25%. That doesn't appear to be the case here. But then either the losing person can still ask for a recount anyway. And again, there is a standard in Ohio, get this, for hanging chads. Can you imagine if we had to litigate hanging chads all over again? But in Ohio, unlike in Florida, they have a standard for what counts. Remember, 70% of the people voting in Ohio were voting with these old punch card systems. And so the issue of hanging chads, they say that if a chad is attached by 3 or 4 corners, a vote shall not be counted for that particular candidate. Meaning, they have actually set out a standard across the state for what counts for hanging chads and what doesn't, to avoid the Bush v. Gore problem. But, it's hard to imagine that this would actually happen again.
Okay, let's go right. Thank you, Dan Abrams. Let's go to Chris Chansing, who's in Cleveland right there, where the action's occurring. Chris, is there any way to do the math on this right now? I know it's getting late, but we're hearing that there's 24,000 provisional, from you probably, 24,000 provisional ballots that have been taken by people and filled in, and therefore they should be counted if this is a close race. Can we look at the math and decide whether the provisional ballots can turn the results?
Well, if my math is right, and again, I don't know that you can extrapolate Cuyahoga County to the rest of the state, but the number right here in Cuyahoga County is 24,660 provisional ballots that have not yet been counted. As you know, there are 10 days that they have to look at those to see if they're legitimate, decide whether they're to be counted. 12% of registered voters are here in Cuyahoga County. So if you take that number and the 24,660, you're coming up with about 260 110,000 provisional ballots. Now, again, I want to make it clear that's a guesstimate based on Cuyahoga County, but if what Bob Bennett is telling me is so, that he thinks they'll win the state by 100,000 votes, maybe a little more than that, and we're looking at potentially 200,000 provisional ballots. You decide, Chris.
Whether it's reasonable to assume there are that many Democratic votes net coming out of those provisional ballots to overturn the apparent margin of victory as we talk.
And there are plenty of lawyers to go at it. Again, they're going to look at these. The whole idea, for people who don't know, you've probably gone over it a million times about provisional ballots. If you go and there's a question about your eligibility to vote, one of the things they wanted to change from 2000 is that people would not be denied that right. So they get this provisional ballot so that they can see if indeed that vote should be counted. Apparently that happened an awful lot in Cuyahoga County. In fact, 24,660 times. We will see what happens in the rest of the state. We'll be looking for those numbers for you.
So just to finish up here on the mathematics, those watching now trying to figure out if John Kerry can still win in Ohio, the question is, can you assume that the 24,660 provisional ballots that were filled in Cuyahoga County can be extrapolated to 8 times that number to 210,000 statewide, which would give you enough provisional ballots out there that could be certified and perhaps cast effectively in this race to offset the 100 and some thousand vote plurality the Republicans are now claiming?
That's right. Now, we don't have the final numbers, and this is just their projections. There are, because of these long lines, some of the counties, Chris, that are coming in slowly, and we'll have to see what those exact numbers are. But the Democrats will tell you that they thought all along that if there were a high number of provisional ballots, it would favor them, that the people who would be questioned would often be student voters who are voting for John Kerry in pretty overwhelming numbers, and minority voters who are also voting for John Kerry in overwhelming numbers. They feel pretty confident if these provisional ballots are counted, they will go very strongly for the Democrats.
Okay, thank you, Chris Jansing. Well, we've got a lot of questions out there now, and I have a sense that we may find it easier to get results in those easier to count, maybe cleaner states like Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa than trying to get a straight vote out of a state like Ohio or Pennsylvania. I'm sorry, I grew up in those kind of states. Yeah. It's very tricky to get a clean vote. And the tricky question is, of course, what do we wait for all night? Let's go to Ben Ginsburg now and be optimistic about getting a count out of Cuyahoga and the rest of that state. You heard that argument we just got. We put it together, basically, Chris Jansing and I, trying to understand the Kerry position, which is if you assume a projection of the number of provisional ballots out there, it's reasonable for the Kerry people to ask for a full count before conceding this election for the presidency after all these years of trying to win it. Well, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, a full count is still a little bit premature. I think taking 24,000 provisional ballots in Cuyahoga and extrapolating that to the whole state is probably not accurate, and it's going to be higher in Cuyahoga than it will in the rest of the state. Ken Blackwell, the Secretary of State, has estimated about 140,000 and noted that there was also a very heavy church registration program. So I think the assumption that they're all Kerry votes somehow is probably fallacious, but born of the very difficult situation the Kerry campaign's in. I mean, goodness knows they fought a hard campaign. They thought they were going to win. It is the most difficult position for a campaign to be in. Your instincts right now are to fight, even if the facts don't warrant it. And I think that's where the Kerry campaign is with the number of provisionals and the setting in Ohio right now.
Okay, in fact, I'm trying to do the algebra here, but I think the algebra, even at the simple level that most of us can do algebra, suggests to try to win 100 plus net votes out of 200 votes is very tricky, given the assumption that there's any kind of vote for the Republican. If the math doesn't work.
Yeah, and you also have to remember, Chris, that someone who comes in the polling place and is given a provisional ballot doesn't appear on the voter registration rolls. In other words, there is already a problem that was discovered that day. And so I think the experience of Ohio and other cities or other states with provisional ballots is that not all those ballots by any stretch of the imagination come in, especially because it's a precinct calculation in Ohio.
Let's go to Carl Quintanilla, who's with the Kerry campaign, and he'll tell us how tough they're going to fight tonight. Let's go to Carl. Carl.
Well, Chris, it at least appears
there.
Well, Chris, it at least appears that this is going to play itself out over the next several hours. We're now being told that Kerry is not going to leave the house anytime soon. The pool reporters over who are at his apartment, waiting outside his apartment for him to leave, were told by a press agent earlier tonight that he would be probably preparing to come to the Westin Hotel over here in Copley Square. That is apparently now not happening and will not happen anytime soon. Some aides have described the atmosphere over there as pandemonium as Kerry continues to absorb what we believe to be a flood of calls between his ground team, campaign manager, and other strategists. This is happening all very quickly. Ever since that statement came out from Mary Beth Cahill, any hope that we would have heard from him tonight, which is what Joe Lockhart had told reporters earlier in the evening, is now essentially being invalidated, Chris. So it does appear that the campaign's going to bunker down and let this go well into the morning. Earlier tonight, we had been talking to a top aide who said the closer the race is going to depend. The closer the race is, that's going to depend how much both sides fight tomorrow morning. I don't think even he was aware of just how true that statement turned out to be, Chris.
Okay, Carl Catania, thanks for joining us from the Kerry headquarters, where they are in fact hunkering down. We haven't seen the candidate this evening. We've had Vanessa. She was very nice to come on, his daughter, early in the evening. He was planning to make a statement several hours ago. He's not apparently going to make one. Pat, you've been through these fights.
Well, I have, and what astonished me early, Chris, was the President of the United States, before he had won this, inviting the cameras up into the White House, I gather up onto the second floor, to photograph him, showing a real measure of confidence and humor. I mean, this was, to me, if they didn't really feel they had it, this was an incredible gamble, because if it had gone the other way, he would have looked terrible, you know, with that, in effect, early victory lap. I do think, taking a look at Ohio, if there's 200,000 votes out and Kerry's got to win 100,000, it's very simple. He's got to win 150,000 of the 200,000 and lose only 50,000 for the 100,000.
You've done the algebra, sir.
But here's the thing.
Right.
I've seen the fact that there's 8% votes out. That would be 400,000, and it would be a lot easier for Kerry out of 400,000 to get a 100,000 vote margin, but still it's a big hill to climb.
You think there might be 400,000 provisional ballots out?
I don't know about that. When it says 92%, that leaves 8% of the vote out, and 8% of 5 million votes cast is 400,000.
Let me ask you a question of ritual. Can a president declare or accept victory without a concession speech by the other side? Has it been done before?
I don't know that it has. Remember, Kennedy waited for Nixon.
For the
when
letter.
Nixon came out in 1960, and he said, it looks as though if this thing's going this way, Senator Kennedy will be our next president. But I don't know. But I'll tell you this, if I were Kerry, I wouldn't concede tonight. I wouldn't concede, because you take a look at to get 20 electoral votes, Bush would have to win Iowa, New Mexico, New Hampshire, and Hawaii. If he loses Ohio, and I doubt he's going to do that, and my guess is he's going to lose Minnesota, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So why would, heaven's name, would Kerry concede right now?
Unless the margin goes above 20.
Unless the margin, and it can't. I don't think it's going to get above 20.
Win Wisconsin and
You get Wisconsin in there, and then you got something in the mix.
Well, at some point, is there a measure that requires that he do give this up, or can he fight this for a couple of weeks?
I mean, look, if you've got if it's undecided in Ohio, and without Ohio, the president hadn't won, why would you give it up?
Because the networks have told him he's lost.
Well, listen,
that's why.
what's amazing,
Don't you accept the fact that it's your job to accept it and salute it?
The president of the United States is winning the popular vote by more than 3 million. And we've talked about the possibility of the president winning the popular vote and losing the electoral vote, and that is within, it's far distant.
You are so cagey, Pat. Throughout the night, you gave us the argument that it was almost impossible for Kerry to win this election. And then when it looks like he did, you made the case that he probably didn't. So what's your game here?
No, the game here is that all these other states like New Mexico, New Hampshire, Nevada, Hawaii have not come in.
Well, but Pat raises a good point, which we haven't talked about, which is that Bush is winning the popular vote by 3 million. One of the things that gave legitimacy to Gore's fight 4 years ago was that he won the popular vote by
Exactly.
500,000.
Yeah.
So this gives, I think, the Bush campaign additional confidence to go out and declare victory before Senator Kerry concedes.
And what does the vote total look like here? I was
It's a little over
about 107 million.
No, I only saw 100 million. Maybe he was walking across the street. He got up to 107.
Yeah, maybe
but,
I'm wrong.
Bush is above 50 million. I think this means Bush got more votes, I believe, than Ronald Reagan, who got more than any man. I think
we may have more problems tonight because NBC has been so careful in calling. We have the hard numbers here: 51, almost 52 million
So
votes for the
20%
president.
are out.
you got 100 million there.
48 million.
But 20% are out.
Yeah.
Or 15%. So we're looking at 110 million.
110 million?
Yeah, 16%.
110
A
million
little
is
lower than we thought.
We are not looking at the 130 million highest notion of what this campaign could be about.
If it's 110 million, it is normal population growth. It is the same kind of election we had last time, the same kind of turnout, if that's the way it turns out.
Not since the South Seas bubble has there been so much hope into such a bad project. Anyway, that everybody's going to be young and everybody's going to turn out. Anyway, we're going to get back with Alan Simpson, one of the old sages of the Senate from Sagebrush Country out there in Wyoming. We're going to hear from him, and we're going to get a lot more information about this toughening position of John Kerry and this strengthening position, apparently, of the president as we see all 100 million votes already counted. We'll be right back after this. We're back with the Battle of Cayuga County in Cleveland. Of course, Cayuga County is Cleveland, but the big question is who's going to carry Ohio before this night's over. It's come down to Ohio being the new Florida. Let's go right now to Carl Quintanilla. What's the position up there now of the Kerry campaign with regard to this finality of this election?
Well, it looks like we're going to find out at least something substantive, Chris. We're told by one source that John Edwards, who's been about 50 yards away in the Westin Hotel for hours now with his wife, his wife's family, and his kids, is going to come across the street and speak here in Copley Square. We're beginning to see some of the pool photographers line up around the perimeter of the stage. No idea what he's going to say, no idea how long he's going to speak, but this will be the first public comment we've heard from either running mate, not just since this statement came out that they're going to try to contest the count in Ohio, but since John Kerry voted today at the State House and made a few brief comments earlier this afternoon. Also, Senator Ted Kennedy, we're told, has just entered Senator Kerry's home. He's still over on Beacon Hill, about a mile or so, 2 miles away. They're obviously discussing what has widely been called among aides to be a rather crazed atmosphere. So we'll be waiting here to see what Senator John Edwards will say, and we'll bring you more details as soon as we get a sense as to when exactly he'll cross the street. Chris.
Thank you, Carl Quintanilla. Let's go right now to Lester Holt for an analysis of what he thinks is going on out there in at the decision desk. How are they seeing it there in terms of calling and why they did call at NBC Ohio for the president?
Well, Chris, the question is where are these additional votes, uncounted votes? Democrats see them in Cuyahoga County, seen a bit differently here at the decision desk. I just went over the numbers, and what they're looking at is about 400,000 votes in Ohio that have yet to be counted. The belief here is that 287,000 of those votes are actually coming from the Cincinnati and Dayton areas that traditionally break the Republican way. So it is not out of the question that the Bush lead you're looking at here on your screen could actually widen before all is said and done. Again, the decision desk here at NBC News believes about 400,000 remaining votes to be counted, the majority of those coming from areas that traditionally have broken in the direction of President Bush and the Republicans. Chris?
Okay, thank you, Lester Holt. At the decision desk, let's go right now to the White House with Nora O'Donnell. Nora, what's happening there right now in terms of preparing for a victory?
Well, the president is upstairs in the residence with his senior staff. They have also invited up some photographers from the news magazines. Chris, you have posed a very interesting question about tonight and the calculus that's going on inside the White House, and that is whether the president needs or will require a phone call, a concession from Senator Kerry before he goes to the Ronald Reagan building tonight in order to make this victory speech, or a speech, if you will, before thousands of supporters reporters gathered there, a top campaign official saying that they are just waiting for a call in perhaps New Mexico or Nevada to, in their words, put them over the top. That suggests that type of language, that once such a call is made, they believe that that will be the legitimate number, over 270, and for the president to then go over and make this speech. Of course, as we all know, that math also includes the 20 EVs in Ohio that are still contested at this moment. The Bush campaign doing the math there, saying any way you slice it, they argue Kerry wouldn't be able to eke out enough amount of votes from those uncounted ballots. Nevertheless, what's going on now appears to be is this wait and see and this calculus being made from the campaign for one more call that will send this president in his motorcade along with the vice president, who's also here at the White House, over to the Ronald Reagan building where they will make this speech tonight. Chris?
Okay, thank you, Norah O'Donnell at the White House. We'll be back to you later. Let's go to Alan Simpson now, a close friend of the vice president, a former United States senator, in fact, a former member of the Republican leadership. Your thoughts tonight, Alan Simpson, sir?
First, how are you, Chris?
I am great. I am great. That's your kind of hee-haw music back there, I guess. They must have brought it in for you.
Well, we're going to stomp. We're going to stomp on the hay bales. I can't even hear myself. Anyway, I've been with the Cheneys all evening. We had dinner down there. It was a great, he's being very steady. He's not jumping up and clicking his heels. He knows it's been a tough race. He knows he's been in the eye of the hurricane. He knows they tried desperately to demonize this wonderful man I've known for nearly 40 years, and it didn't work. So he and Lynn, I think, feel very good. Lynn is very pleased. She was ready to click her heels a little. Everybody's tired but elated, and now we're waiting for them both to come here with Laura and Lynn to the Ronald Reagan building.
Are they optimistic about catching that state for the president that they went out and got out there in the Pacific Ocean, Hawaii?
Well, Dick told me they had a tremendous rally out there. They had about 10,000 people. They've got a Republican governor. They don't scoff at that one. And then there's a great tendency among people in Hawaii to vote for the incumbent. They voted for incumbent Democrats for so long they nearly forgot they had another party, and they are very prone to vote for an incumbent.
Let me ask you, you're a master of the gentility of the political sport. Yeah, right. I'm warming you up for this one. Do you have to get a concession speech out of the other guy? You've been through a lot of elections, your dad did too, before you can declare victory.
I've been through them all, Chris. I watched my dad win as governor. I watched him defeated for re-election. I watched him win. I watched my brother lose. I was fortunate. I never lost one, but because I believe that politics is a contact sport, and an attack unanswered is an attack believed. And whenever they savaged me, I gave it right back. Now your question, so I can get to it again. Do I believe...
Does a gentleman have to have the other side concede before he declares victory?
I think in this situation, they're going to do that because Kerry's people, at least, not John, are making noises like Ohio is still in play. I don't believe that. And I don't believe that's just because of the projections. It's just that I've been sitting all evening with the people who are running the strategy. They know exactly where these 350 or 400,000 votes are. And they've been exactly right on Florida, and they've been exactly right on Ohio, and they're going to be exactly right on New Mexico. And that's what I have seen. I can't believe the precision with which they called this stuff 3 hours ago. So I don't think much is going to change. So I think...
Does the president need to carry any of the Great Lakes states to win this for sure? Does he need Wisconsin, Minnesota, or Iowa?
Well, I think that's a nice insurance policy to stick in your pocket, but I think with Nevada, I still say, and New Mexico, of course, Iowa, that things, he would not need one of those big states, and yet I think he could still pick one up.
Okay, we'll go back to your music, Senator. You've had a great night.
I'm going to go out here.
To your
Chris, I'm going to go out here and I'll look like a crane in the swamp when I get this dance, flapping my wings.
Okay.
Good to hear you.
Well, Senator Alan Simpson, sir, it's nice to have you join us from
Always.
that music that sounds like music back there. Anyway,
It's just they think Nat King Cole is the deceased pharaoh in Egypt.
Thank you, Senator.
You bet.
Let me go back here. Let me get back to the world of sanity and numbers because that was the world of something or other, but it was fun. Let me ask you this. The Republicans, according to the senator, quite clearly, he stated there, Alan Simpson, that the Republican number crunchers have said that the votes still outstanding in Ohio are Republicans, and any talk of a successful recount is nonsense.
Well, and in fact, they agree with the NBC decision desk, which says that the outstanding votes are largely Republican votes. But in any case, you've heard from the Kerry campaign that they are not conceding. So this fight is on. I mean, Alan Simpson brings so much to this night because he's not only a great friend, of course, of Dick Cheney's, but he is one of the closest friends of Bush 41, was in the room with 41 and 43 the night that this whole mess erupted 4 years ago with Al Gore refusing to concede. He brings so much history to all of this.
Well, let's go through this. Let's pick this apart. And Pat, you're very good at this. Let's go. And Jeannie, let's do the numbers. Chris. Let's do it quite simply here. There's two questions here on the table. One, are there enough votes out there to reverse the count underway right now? Yes or no?
Look at Ohio. It says 97% are in. That means 3% are out. 3% of 5 million is 150,000. To what Kerry would have to do is win 125,000 of the 150,000 remaining. Pardon? Well, that doesn't count the
second question. That's the second question. If we continue the count underway, is there any chance Kerry can win? Answer no.
Yes, there is. Kerry would have to get something like 6 out of 7 votes that are counted.
That's implausible.
200 provisional ballots and
That's why the
150,000.
president should wait for one more state. He's exactly right. And then go out and if Kerry doesn't call him, put the moral pressure on this guy, because what Kerry is saying is we're fighting Ohio in the courts, and the president should accept that and say, okay, we accept that. We claim Ohio. But he's got to wait for one more state.
What about the practicality of an expeditious count of these provisional ballots to lock it in? It takes an hour per...
The law is very specific. They are individually challenged, and you will have that whole issue contested for a month or more.
No, you have a 10-day period in which to certify whether the specific provisional ballots are valid. At the end of that 10-day period, you can start counting those ballots. But it would be at least 10 days before they would be able to certify that. But they have to go back and check.
But once you count them individually, and you can spend as much as an hour apiece.
With a lawyer apiece standing looking over your shoulder.
Chris, as a practical matter, though, you just heard Simpson say they're waiting for one more state, take them over 269, whether one of these four electoral votes or 5 electoral votes, and then they're headed for the Ronald Reagan building.
Either New Mexico or Nevada.
Yeah. And just think of
the other question is, if we go back to a more rigorous test for what they have to meet to declare victory, you take the 20 votes away from the 269, you're left with 249, right? Mm-hmm. Is there any way tonight, in the next couple hours, they can come up with the requisite 21 votes?
Here's how. Iowa, New Mexico,
Iowa's 7.
Iowa's 7, New Mexico's 5, New Hampshire's 4, and Hawaii's 4, okay? Wisconsin is 10.
That's only 20, Pat.
Wisconsin is 10. If you lose Ohio, you only lose 10, Chris.
Okay.
I mean, you only lose 20.
So give me what they have to do tonight to win without Ohio being necessary.
All right, they could do it with Minnesota, and Wisconsin would give them back the 20.
That's 20. They need
Michigan, I think, would give them 17.
They need 2 more.
Iowa would give them 7. New Mexico would give them 5. New Hampshire 4. Hawaii 4.
Right.
So they need 5 more states.
But it's more likely that Kerry will carry Michigan and Minnesota.
Or 2 or 3 big ones, yeah.
So,
and probably New Hampshire.
The president would have to carry, and New Hampshire, which we haven't called yet.
And Hawaii.
And Hawaii. So, realistically speaking, the president.
If you do it that way,
Wisconsin,
you cannot
Iowa,
do it. If what Kerry's leading in now, Kerry gets, you cannot get 20 more.
You can. You can't.
Okay, let me suggest. I know we're beyond common sense here, but all the states outstanding, I can tell you, that NBC is being so rigorous about how they're counting and making calls tonight that you can bet that about these things are going to be 50-50 in terms of how they break, because they're just being so careful about the numbers. The numbers are very, very close.
But there's another issue here.
And that's a reasonable assumption that the president will get enough votes to pass 270 through a number of opportunities tonight.
But even if he were not to, by declaring victory with perhaps one more state, which is what Ellen Simpson told us the strategy is, there is a huge amount of moral authority that comes with that declaration. There's the international world, there are the markets. As the days progress, it becomes increasingly difficult for the Democrats to challenge.
Particularly when they
We're going to have to take a break now, as we often do at this time of night. Take a commercial break. We're waiting, by the way. When we come back, we'll see John Edwards coming out to make that statement. That's the plan when we come back on MSNBC. Still at Democracy Plaza at Rockefeller Center, counting the votes. We're here at Carrie Edwards waiting. We're going to continue to wait until John Edwards, the vice presidential running mate, comes out. He's going to make a statement. I assume it will be a preliminary statement and certainly a statement of hope based upon what we heard from Mary Beth Cahill. They're not about to give up. But look at all those volunteers out there still hoping for Carrie to pull this out tonight. Let's go right now to a piece of tape we just took of the Secretary of State of Ohio, Ken Blackwell. He's a Republican, and here's what he had to say about these provisional ballotings.
We'll know how many ballots were cast and tabulated when we know it. What I've told everybody to do is take a deep breath and relax. You know, what we're going to give you is a solid tabulation when we give it to you. If it takes 2 hours, 2 days, or 2 weeks, the result that we give you will be a good result that the voters of the state of Ohio can have confidence in. So all of the speculation and all of the projections I don't get into. You know, a lot of folks came into this state expecting to see a lot of confusion, a lot of havoc, but what you got was a well-managed election by 50,000 election officials and poll workers over 88 counties. As I've told many of you, elections are human enterprises, and you're going to have a hiccup here or hiccup there. What you manage against is chronic choking in the system.
We're going to wait just a second to hear from John Edwards, of course, the young running mate of John Kerry, and they're going to have to figure out what his words are going to be. That's probably what's holding him up in the headquarters there in the where they're trying to figure out what to say. Do they say they're going to wait to hear from all the results tonight? Are they going to say they dispute the results of the declaration by NBC and other networks that Ohio has gone for the president? What are they going to say? That's a big question for them to figure out in there tonight, because it is going to be the headline in the papers tomorrow as we get up in the morning. That's going to be the fact, unless we get some quick reporting from the states of Minnesota and Michigan. Here comes John Edwards to tell us where they stand and how hard they're going to fight.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's been a long night, but we've waited 4 years for this victory. We can wait one more night. Tonight, John and I are so proud of all of you who are here with us and all of you across the country who have stood with us in this campaign. John Kerry and I made a promise to the American people that in this election, every vote would count and every vote would be counted. Tonight, we are keeping our word and we will fight for every vote. You deserve no less. Thank you.
Well, that's what you call talking points. We know what he had to say, and he said it. We've waited 4 years for this, and we can certainly wait for another night to get the result. Let's take a look for everybody who's watching now and keeping up with this incredible end game. I guess you'd have to consider it for the presidential election of the year 2004. Let's go through the states that have yet to be decided by NBC and I presume by other networks as well. Let's take a look. This Michigan was 78% of the precincts reporting, and about a 90,000 vote difference, too close to call. There's one, Michigan. Minnesota, too close to call. 78% of precincts in there, too close to call. That one. 87% of precincts in there in the state of Wisconsin, too close to call. All too close to call. And another too close to call. Iowa, a bit smaller of a state. There was 97% of precincts in, and a very small difference. Apparently, I've been hearing tonight that those are Republican areas that haven't come in yet. Nevada, too close to call, very small state in terms of electoral votes, but 65% of precincts reporting. Very interesting, 65%. There's a lot to count there. 93% of the vote, 98% of the vote in New Mexico. It's also too close to call, but small vote difference there, less than 30,000 in that count so far. New Hampshire, this is one that stunned us. Why does it take so long to count such a small state? Anyway, 10,000 votes, that's the explanation. Only 10,000 votes separating the two, with 95% of precincts reporting. Hawaii, 65% in of the precincts. Obviously, that's a close vote there, but that's simply we're calling that too early to call. Let's take a look at where they are. You see they're clustered over there in the upper Midwest, and then two of them down there in the Southwest. Pat, you're raring to say.
All right, here, I'll say it. Let's give all the states where Kerry is leading to Kerry and where Bush is leading to Bush. Bush is leading Iowa, Nevada, New Mexico. Give those to Bush, subtract Ohio, and Kerry wins.
Subtract Ohio.
Subtract. And Kerry wins.
So Ohio is worth the fight.
Yeah. Ohio will decide the election. If the trends are going as they're going in these states, Ohio decides the election. Whoever gets it wins. It is the Florida of 2004.
We've got a presidential call again. We're going to interrupt right now. We have another call. Here it comes. Hawaii, John Kerry. John Kerry has won. One of your states has jumped in there. It's a small state, and by the way, the vice president, as we noted, did take the trip out there this weekend to try to win it. He also used it as an occasion to remind us of a possible second Pearl Harbor, by the way, not incidentally. That was a powerful statement by the vice president. So there you see the numbers shaping up, 211 to 269, no 270 by the president, even giving him, by the way, even giving him Ohio. He doesn't have the 270 requisite to win yet. And so this race is on. And Pat, you make a point there that if Ohio is still in place, so let's go back to that contingency. Is it fair for a reasonable person to presume, certainly NBC is not one of those people that presumes, that there are enough votes yet to be counted in areas which are open to a reasonable assumption of Democratic voting to say this isn't over?
The numbers are not, because there's about, as I say, about 200,000 or some, and Kerry would have to get 6 out of 7. It's extraordinarily improbable, even in Cuyahoga County. But that gets to the provisional ballots, and that's something I don't know how many there are of them. I think Dee Dee knows about that. I just don't know. But the Kerry people must know something about them, that if you add...
You're assuming, when your back is to the wall, you're not always rational in terms of numbers. You're understanding the politics of the situation. There are good reasons why people like Hillary Rosen on our show a while ago, and certainly Mary Beth Cahill, the Democratic Party feels, based upon everything you hear from those people, they were too genteel in conceding 4 years ago. Al Gore gave a beautiful concession speech that the Democratic Party at its base wished he'd never given. They didn't want to be genteel or noble. They wanted to fight that thing till the last dog died, and he didn't.
Well, look, their back is to the wall. I can't disagree with what Edward said. Look, first, there's tremendous... Everything's got to fall into place for them conceivably to make Ohio competitive. I think you got to get to the provisionals. Secondly, the president's sitting there on a lead of more than 3 million votes nationally. The whole world is watching. And if the president comes down there after winning one of these small states, and he's got 273 or 277, and says, we have taken the country, I mean, the pressure on Kerry will be incredible to crack and concede.
Why is the president... I'm trying to find a member of the Republican Party that nobody even represents to me, even I philosophically at this table. Why?
Let me give it a stab.
Let me give it a stab. Why can't they just call it a night and wait for the returns to come in? Why do they insist on having a party or some kind of a victory speech tonight? Why is that important politically?
If they do not claim victory tonight, they are saying de facto Ohio is in play. And they're not going to say that.
Yeah.
Is it also for world consumption? I go back to this argument. It does matter who wins these elections to the world.
Oh, yeah.
The Brits are watching. Everybody in the world's watching.
But see,
to have the president say, I've won, does that close the deal?
The president, no, it doesn't close it, but what the president wants is to shift the onus, the burden, not, I mean, suppose the president went out and said, gee, we don't know what's exactly the story here in Ohio, then Kerry would say, you're right, we don't. We got months to go. So what the president is shift the onus of the moral opprobrium on John Kerry, who will not, even though he has lost, concede.
He becomes the challenger. He becomes the upstart. He becomes the person to blame if anything goes wrong in the world. That you could then conceivably argue.
They say, why don't you do a Nixon?
It's not for John Kerry.
Do like Nixon did in 1960. Play the man.
More problems. Let's go to Iowa. We've got Natalie Allen out there in Des Moines. Let's hear from Natalie about the problems they have in getting a direct count out of that state. Natalie, what's the problem?
Chris, that's right. 97% of the votes have been tallied. George Bush is ahead of John Kerry by 11,000 votes, but now there's a snag. 2 counties had their machines break down on them, and between those two there's a potential of 15,000 votes to count. At first we were told by the Secretary of State's office about 30 minutes ago that they would have to get new machines in from the manufacturer over in Nebraska. Now we've just received an update that one of the counties has its machines back up and counting, and the second county will have its machine back up and counting in the morning. So it doesn't look like they're going to have the delay they expected. They were telling us it would be a day and a half before they had the final vote ready to report from Iowa. Now it looks like it will take place sooner than that. The one other thing that's the problem here is one county is still tallying some 7,000 absentee ballots, and they could receive still some 60,000 absentee ballots. If they were postmarked today, they have a week to count these ballots. So there's still many, many votes that could be in play here in Iowa, Chris.
Okay, I was sorry to be so admonishing. I'm not holding you responsible for the failure of the Iowa electoral system. But let me ask you this.
Thank you for that.
If you look at all the numbers, are these balloting areas that we're looking at right now, are they crucial to a decision?
They could be, because as I mentioned, Bush is up 11,000 right now with 97% reporting, and you're seeing a potential of 20,000 votes up to 60,000 more absentee ballots that could come in, so yes.
And they come from all over the state, right? We can't predict that they're largely Democrat or Republican. We don't know.
Don't know that, right.
Okay, it's great. I'm sorry to commit. So I really did feel like I blamed you for the screw up out there. I'm sorry.
I didn't take it that way.
Natalie Allen, thank you very much.
Right,
we'll get back to our panel. We'll be back to you later to get the update, probably later on in the morning. Patrick, you got more numbers. You're just the most amazing track tout here tonight.
Well, no,
it's this thing.
Well, this is it depends over in Iowa. You know, you got what they say, if there's 60,000 out and Bush has 11,000 lead, you subtract the 11,000 from 60,000, you get 49,000. And Kerry's Bush can get 25,000, Kerry 36, and you're out there, or just about that. You're right there.
Yeah.
And so that's a doable thing. So Iowa's still out, but the point is, Chris, he's got to get one state to take him over the top.
We got to go. We got a big highlight of the evening now, even though it's the morning. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the governor of California, is out there in public. Look at him. I guess he's going to make a statement. Here he is. He had a ballot initiative on the ballot out there, obviously, and he learned about it. Let's take a look.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight. And especially want to thank my wife, Maria, the greatest first lady right over there. Great partner. I want to thank you for all the support. Thank you very much, Maria. Love you. Thank you. Oh, the polls have closed and the results are in. And we have a winner for tonight. The people of California. People of California are the winners today. Big hand to the people. Last year you elected me, and last year you sent me up to Sacramento. I knew that I was doing the movie Twins, but I did not know. But anyway, Let me just say, last year you elected me and you sent me to Sacramento to create some action. And this is exactly what I've done. We've turned around the state, we created some action, and we tried to make it again the golden state that it once was. Well, tonight, you gave me the tools that I needed to get the job done. And I wanted to thank the people for working so hard. There were thousands and thousands of volunteers that I saw when I traveled up and down the state of California, campaigning for my initiatives and campaigning for the different candidates. I tell you that the kind of work that I've seen was so inspirational, it was uplifting, and I want to thank all those volunteers for putting up the yard signs, for going out handing out leaflets, doing fundraisers, knocking on doors, making phone calls, and campaigning and campaigning and campaigning. So because of all this hard work, I think that people spoke loud and clear. This was a victory that was not a victory for me, but it was a victory from the people of California. So a big hand to the people of California that have spoken out. And today, the voice of the people was loud and clear, that the people said no to the job killers and yes for a booming economy. The people said no to the budget busters and yes to fiscal responsibility. The people said no to criminal loopholes and yes for safer streets. The people said no to out-of-control gambling and yes to a fair share for California. And the people once again said no to the special interests and yes for reform. And now,
okay, that's Arnold Schwarzenegger, the governor of California, applauding the passage of a California ballot initiative. We're going to go right now to Keith Olbermann to get the details on the meaning of that latest victory for Arnold Schwarzenegger. Keith.
It was a proposition in, Chris, yeah, it was Prop 71 in California, a bond issue for stem cell research. If you can imagine a Republican governor of a most populous state coming out in favor, he endorsed this 2 weeks ago, of stem cell research. It would establish $3 billion in stem cell research based on a bond, making California the nation's largest financial backer of stem cell studies. In the middle of the entire debate and the way the numbers turned up in terms of moral issues and how important that was in the exit polling, a Republican governor of a state backs a pro-stem cells research bond. While we've got you here, let's go through the Senate quickly, where the Republicans have taken 3 Senate seats from the Democrats 2 from the Republicans. Ken Salazar in Colorado over Pete Coors. Pete Coors with a concession speech not long ago.
Okay, look at that. Ken Salazar beat Pete Coors. Boy, that's beating the name brand after all, isn't it? We got some other races we haven't seen, by the way. Oh, there he is right now. That's Pete Coors.
And I will now go back to having the greatest job in America, running a beer company. Thank you all very much. I love you. God bless you. Thank you.
The Coors battle was one of 9 toss-ups in the Senate tonight. The others, as you see, have been decided with North Carolina, Burr, the Republican, over Erskine Bowles. South Carolina, Jim DeMint beat Inez Tannenbaum, another pickup for the Republicans. In Colorado, the Salazar-Coors outcome you know about, and Tom Coburn in Oklahoma picking up the vacant seat for the Republicans. And still underway with 92% of the vote in, with a 5,000 vote difference. It is too early to call. Too close to call. Daschle Thune in South Dakota.
Quickly in Florida, still too early to call, even though it was last Saturday. It was Governor Bush introducing Mel Martinez as Senator-elect Martinez. Hasn't happened yet. 78,000 vote difference. Kentucky, although Jim Bunning gave a victory speech, you asked that question about can you give a victory speech if the other guy hasn't conceded yet. Jim Bunning did that, and it's hours ago. Is he behaving erratically, or is that just the irascible ball player who last smiled on his bubblegum card picture in 1957? Louisiana is still too early to call, even though 99% of the vote is in between the lead Democrat, Chris John, and the lead Republican, David Vitter. You got to get 50% to avoid a runoff. And lastly, Alaska, where the polls just closed an hour and 45 minutes ago, where the senator who was appointed by her governor father, Lisa Murkowski, trying to stave off former Governor Tony Knowles. That's the Everything Else desk. Now back to Chris Matthews and Ohio, already in progress. Chris?
Okay, thank you. That's it looks to me like we've got a long list of states yet to be decided in terms of the presidential campaign, all the upper Midwest states, and of course, Pat, you're right. There's enough numbers there to turn this thing. But you know, if you pull back Ohio, and it seems like that's the question.
Yeah, there's not only enough. It's hard to see how Bush wins if he does not get Ohio. But let me mention some, Chris.
Let's make sure everybody's up to date watching us right now. The assumptions you have to make to deny the president the state that this network and others have given him, which is Ohio, and we're looking at all the numbers right now, you have to assume that the count, the 3% that you can see there hasn't been counted, is going to swing that. That's a lot of votes to turn around. Or you have to assume that these provisional ballots can come in and rescue John Kerry after the formal vote's over. And that's a lot of assuming.
It's a lot of assumptions, yeah.
And one thing we should point out is that at least according to the results that the state Republican-controlled state officials are reporting from Cuyahoga County, the total number of provisional overseas civilian and military ballots and absentee ballots are 26,247 from the Cleveland area, which doesn't seem to be enough
to make the difference in the cause.
That's at least what the Republicans.
Let me tell you, I've got a lot of confidence in NBC tonight. They are being very, very cautious, hesitant as hell by referencing. I'll just reference all the states that we haven't called yet, and to make these grand heroic assumptions about how things are going to turn around in Ohio may be true if they occur, but they're not to be predicted. These are the ones that we haven't been able to call yet. They're too close or too early to call. Let's go right now to Carl Quintanilla, because it looks like we're not going to hear anything more tonight before daybreak from the Kerry campaign. Let's go to Carl.
Yeah, Chris, in politics they call it a full lid. That moment when they don't expect any more news for the remainder of the evening, and that's what we have from the Kerry campaign tonight. Ever since John Edwards gave those brief remarks on stage, they started to play their signature tune by Bruce Springsteen. They're running a brief video of a montage of Kerry images, something that was obviously planned for a much different appearance. But you've got to hand it to some of these people who've been out here in the rain for several hours, Chris. And we're also told, meanwhile, over at Kerry's house on Beacon Hill here in Boston, he continues to talk on the phone. He's joined by Senator Ted Kennedy. They're talking to advisor John Sasso and Mary Beth Cahill as the lawyers here at the War Room continue to hammer out what is obviously going to be a very complicated day tomorrow, Chris.
Okay, Carl, one last question. As they go to sleep tonight there and shut us off from any further word from them, and they're thinking, do you have a sense, I know this is hard for a reporter, is this a numerical bet they're making that they can still pull this out, or is it a political positioning they're taking to maintain John Kerry's leadership of the Democratic Party?
My own guess is that they saw this coming long before any of us did. I think, judging from the infrastructure they had built for this exact kind of scenario happening, but this really doesn't come as too much of a surprise to them. I could be completely wrong about that, but my sense is the speed with which they launched this plan into action suggests that they saw it coming a mile away.
Okay, thank you, Carl Quintanilla. Are you going to shut down for the night, too, or are you going to keep a listing post there?
We'll see you on the Today Show in the morning, Chris.
Thank you very much, Carl. It looks ready to get wet and cold up there. Okay. Okay, Imus in the morning. Look, let me ask you this, Patrick. This question here. I'm losing my train of thought finally. Go ahead.
Let me raise a point. Why did the president do so surprisingly well in Michigan and surprisingly badly in Pennsylvania, despite the fact he'd taken 44 trips or some to Pennsylvania, and do so well in Ohio.
Yeah.
Michigan and Ohio have the
Okay,
gay
let me
rights,
suggest
the
the
gay
word. It's
marriage
2 words.
ordinance.
Yeah.
Gay marriage.
Street money.
No, gay marriage
No,
ordinance.
street money.
Street money in Pennsylvania.
Street money. So let's watch now. We're watching the dispersal of the Kerry loyalists, the stalwarts up there in Massachusetts and Boston, who are finally making their way home. I guess by declaring a media lid. In other words, no more statements out of the campaign. These volunteers realize they won't be learning anything either before dawn. So they're heading home. It's almost like at the end of a football game. Well, there's a couple minutes left on the clock.
And when you say street money, it's sort of a double entendre because it's John Street, the mayor of Philadelphia, and it's street money, walking around money. And he told Chris the other night that they were going to have $1 million.
Why did Bush do so well in Michigan, which he rarely visited?
According to
There's the gay marriage ordinance, Chris, the under-the-radar stuff. And frankly, the fact that this was put on all these ballots, I'll bet if you go around those states, you will find an increment for Bush in every one of those states.
And in addition, you're finding in the exit polls that the voters were split, evenly split on who could better handle the economy, instead of it being an edge for the Democrat.
We're fighting on the same line, everybody. We're going to go right now to a U.S. Congresswoman from the state of Ohio who's very much insistent on the viability of Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs Jones. She's been on the show just recently. Congresswoman, what do you see as the opportunity here surviving of John Kerry winning in Ohio?
You have to remember that we still have a significant number of provisional ballots, somewhere close to 200,000 to 300,000 provisional ballots. The fact that there is a controversy operating here, we have the chair of the Bush campaign as the Secretary of State, Kenneth Blackwell, in Cuyahoga County, the chair of the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party, sitting on the Board of Elections. This race is still in play in Ohio, and we believe we have the opportunity to make up the difference in the provisional balloting piece.
How do you get that figure, Congresswoman, of 200,000 provisional ballots? I don't think we've been able to come up with that number.
Well, I believe that's the number that Secretary Blackwell gave when he was on earlier today, that there's some 200,000 to 300,000 provisional ballots still left to be counted. And a significant number of them come from Northeast Ohio, where John Kerry has a great amount of support.
And you believe that the plurality of those, the great mass of those ballots will be validated. They don't count automatically, obviously.
They don't count automatically, but one of the problems we had was the failure of many people to be noticed about their absentee ballot location. And so therefore, if they voted, if it is on the state to give them the location they did not, that they have an opportunity to vote. And that's not only in Northeast Ohio, it's in other parts of the state. I think around Franklin County, in fact, they went to paper ballots, even though they traditionally use computer balloting. So we sincerely believe that we have an opportunity to pull out the state of Ohio.
So these are people, just to make this clear to everybody, stay with us, Congresswoman, that people who applied for absentee ballots, didn't get them in time to use them, showed up to vote, and they were told that you've already been counted as a voter because you asked for an absentee ballot. These are people who received provisional ballots in those instances.
Exactly right. And a judge made a ruling that they were entitled to provisional ballot if, in fact, they were noticed that they were going to give an absentee ballot and never received it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. You're optimistic. In fact, politically, not just numerically, you think this is a fight that the senators should make. Okay, thank you very much, Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs Jones has been on the show before, and we'll be back again. We're listening to the rally. I think we're listening to the true New York sense behind us. Although the state went for John Kerry, the people that come to us are not afraid to say they're for Bush Cheney. Let me get back, as I always do, to Pat Buchanan at this moment.
Right. Well, let me. We got our friends out there, Chris. If there are 175,000 provisional ballots, okay, the Kerry would have to win 150,000 of them by my count and lose 25,000 of them, okay? In other words, you'd have to win them 6-1, and that would wipe out Bush's 125,000 lead. You'd have a dead tie. I mean, to win it, he'd probably have to have virtually every single one of the provisional ballots would have to belong to John Kerry.
It's just completely improbable.
And that also assumes
but
they're all
that raises a question. You see 97% counted. 3% are not counted. Are those the provisional ballots or those uncounted ballots?
No, that's raw vote.
That's raw vote.
Okay, if that's Cayuga County, it could help carry.
And the turnout is 5.8 million, nearly 6 million in Ohio, not 5 million. So that maybe gives
Let me have to keep. I've been reminded this throughout the night. We fall into this habit of saying, when we see those numbers up there, 97% of the actual voting, that's 97% of precincts. Now, it may well correspond for all we know, but there's no reason to believe it. They say that 98 now. We're not sure. There's no reason to believe that refers to absolute numbers. But of course, it's a rough estimate if you assume all precincts are equally sized. Which is a heroic assumption.
Now, his lead, Bush's lead just went to 137,000. So he is gaining. That suggests that the fellows that say these are coming from Dayton, these final votes are correct. The Republicans are correct.
The more conservative areas of the state.
Exactly.
Now, if we talk about the other states here, if we give Kerry all the ones that he's ahead and give Bush all the ones that he's ahead, take Ohio off the table, you've got Bush at 266 and Kerry at 252. You can check me on that. It's late.
Okay.
Yeah, take Ohio away.
When I say Ohio,
and give Kerry all the ones where he's ahead.
Ohio decides it.
Ohio decides it. Yeah. So, you know.
Well, here we are in downtown or midtown New York in the middle of the night. It's almost 3 o'clock. We got a bunch of people out here making noise who seem to be happy with the results.
Don Imus is
Why are we arguing with them? It's quite a night. Anyway, we're going to go to break right now and come back. More from Democracy Plaza, well named because this is going to win a lot of democracy here tonight at Rockefeller Center. What a beautiful part of this country to be originating from. We'll be back with more about this very difficult situation for the Kerry folks. They simply look like, well, they went to bed. That seems to be their solution for a while here, and we may have to do the same. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Well, that's the story of the night. You see the president's band of success there, that red sheet going all the way up to almost to 270. It's at 269. The White House is waiting for a couple of more states to come in so that they can formally declare victory tonight. Perhaps Nevada, perhaps New Mexico. And, of course, we have also the states that are hanging here. The hanging chads of the year 2004, the states that haven't decided yet. They'll be coming up in a moment here. We've got Kerry at 211, the president at 269. But, of course, we have states that have not made up their mind yet. Let's go right now to Dan Abrams, however, to talk about the state that is the most difficult for the Kerry folks to concede. Let me ask you, Dan Abrams, thanks for joining us, Dan. These provisional ballots, I know it's a new line of country for us all. I've said to you before, they're simply kicking the can down the road by having these things, but they're going to hector the Bush victory, apparently, because the Democrats are going to keep referring to them.
Well, that's right. Look, the Secretary of State in Ohio has estimated that there were about 175,000 provisional ballots. Let's even say that there were 200,000 provisional ballots. Remember, that doesn't mean there are 200,000 votes out there. It means there are 200,000 efforts by people who said, you, the government, made a mistake by not having me on your voter roll. And so they said, okay, here's a ballot. Go ahead and fill it out. If it turns out you're right, we'll count your vote. But if you're wrong, we won't count your vote. And so there's no way you're talking about having actually 200,000 votes. In fact, in Illinois, one of the few states that used provisional ballots in the past, remember, new law, only 11 to 20% or so of the votes actually counted. Now, it's expected that that number would be higher in this election. But again, we have to be very careful. We're talking about these numbers to not assume that 200,000 provisional ballots is 200,000 votes. And right now, with 98% of the vote in, you have President Bush up by 137,000. Even if that number goes down, as Pat was pointing out a minute ago, you still have a major hurdle to overcome if you're going to avoid litigation, meaning if you're just going to count on having those provisional ballots counted and not deal with lawsuits, boy, do they have an uphill battle.
Let me ask you about the reasons for issuing an absent, or I should say a provisional ballot. I can think you'd come to the polling booth and not realize you're not registered. Would that be one? You just hadn't gotten around to it. You'd let your registration slip away, right?
Well,
that's one reason.
Well,
right?
no, presumably you're a registered voter. I mean, a provisional ballot is given to someone who is a registered voter. It's not to say, oh, you didn't register and you can vote. It's to say, I am registered. I don't know why you don't have me down as a registered voter. And then there are other rules, meaning, for example, the Court of Appeals in the Sixth Circuit has said you have to vote in the right precinct. So, for example, if you went to a different precinct, you said, give me a provisional ballot to vote with, they gave it to you, it turns out you were actually supposed to be at a different precinct, your provisional ballot wouldn't count at all.
So how do you make the leap of faith that a certain percentage of these provisional ballots will in fact be accepted as true voters and legitimate voters? How do you go about this? There's no real history here, is there?
No, there's not. I mean, there's going to be no way to predict what percentage of them will be accepted. And there'll be battles, I'm certain, over whether some should or shouldn't. But one thing is for certain, there's no way that all of them will be. Nothing like all of them will be. And so you have to keep that in mind when you're talking about these numbers, and you're talking about possibilities, probabilities. You can't have a firm statistic, but you have to assume that in a whole lot of these cases that the government was right, that these people weren't on the voter rolls, that they hadn't registered, that they'd already voted, for whatever reason, that they were not entitled to vote again.
Okay, boy, we're in new territory here. Patrick, stay with us, Dan.
Dan is right on the money. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong. There's 200,000 provisional ballots. Kerry is down by 137,000 votes. 2/3 of the provisional ballots would have to be permitted, and Kerry would have to get every one of them.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's a real problem. Let me ask you to compare this to the situation we faced in Florida 4 years ago. Is this a cleaner question? You simply decide whether the state, let's forget what we say tonight. Would the state normally go look at all these provisional ballots and assess their validity?
Yeah, they would. I mean, look, that's part of the new law, is you have to have this out there as an opportunity, and then you have to go back and assess how many of these should be considered as real votes. There's no question that would be done. And remember, as Dee Dee pointed out before, you're talking about 11 days before they're going to really get to the process of counting the provisional ballots. But again, the question is, are we even in the ballpark of reality when it comes to the numbers?
Yeah, I guess the question is whether the normal process within the state jurisdiction of Ohio, where they have to make these decisions, is not us to make the decision or either candidate. They're going to go ahead and count these provisional ballots after they complete the formal count of all the ballots, and then they'll go count these and see if they cause any change in the final verdict of the electoral votes of Ohio. But it seems to me that's a lot of time to pass before, Patrick, we get it. Another issue has nothing to do with the law. Aren't we going to get results in from these other states in time to make the real difference here?
Well, I think the results we're going to get in from the other states are going to leave us with Ohio as decisive, Chris. That would be my projection of what's going on here. But I think given the fact what Dan just told us, you got 200,000 provisional ballots, and he said, 10 or 20% in Illinois were the only ones allowed, and he would have to get about 67% of them allowed here in Ohio, and Kerry would have to get every single vote. It's going to come to a point where somebody's going to say, John, it is not doable, and they're going to probably say it, my guess is, it ain't going to be a Florida. This could be over by
noon tomorrow. I know the culture of the Democrats. Let's go right now to Joe Trippi, who knows his people, and they are the bloggers, the people out there on their websites, many of them political zealots. Let me ask you, Joe, what are the people you know in that world of the internet saying to the Kerry campaign about fighting this?
Well, they're saying a strong message not to concede. In fact, probably the best example of it is dailycause.com, which is a very big blog on the progressive side, saying the networks have essentially called this one for Bush. There's still votes to be counted, and Kerry better not get in his head to concede before all of them are counted. We're also getting a lot of remarks from citizen journalists out there who have questioned the whole idea of the networks calling this race calling Ohio for Bush. And I think we're sort of playing into some fear out there about this coverage and the election not being legitimate. And I just want to read a couple of them. Shana Adams from Dayton Mills, Ohio. I think it was completely irresponsible to call Ohio so early. Lucas is sizable. It's a county out there. Heavily Democratic and hardly closed as of yet. Cuyahoga, where I live, was a disaster as far as disenfranchised voters were concerned. Provisional ballots might very well decide this election. Your station is only giving legitimacy to not counting all the votes here in Ohio. Kim Walker in Los Angeles, another citizen journalist, says, how can you call Ohio for Bush when there are people still in line waiting for a vote? Why aren't you covering Michael Moore entertaining the people who've been waiting in line for hours in Cleveland to cast their votes? You must not help Bush steal another election by not letting all the votes be counted. And where were the paper trails in Florida? I will not believe Bush can win this election without hard proof and every single vote counted. Otherwise, he will never be recognized as legitimate. And when we look at what happened in 2000 and the issues around Florida, it's clear that on the net, there is this legitimacy issue of having every vote counted before we call the race. And everybody out there, particularly on these blogs like Daily Cause, is saying, Kerry, don't give in to this. Make sure every vote's counted before you even think about conceding.
Let me ask you, Joe, do you think personally, as a political activist, you've been following this campaign since you were involved with before, with Howard Dean, do you think Kerry would be well advised to hold off on any kind of concession?
I think the problem here is that you have all these people who really did do a lot. I mean, I know we've been talking about whether young voters voted or not today, but they really did, give this guy $80 million online. A lot of them were out there pounding on doors, and they want every vote counted. And I think it's pretty important for Kerry. I mean, Kerry's sort of in a box right now. He wants. I mean, you want to have every vote counted for these folks and make sure this is the result. At the other time, yeah, I mean, if Ohio keeps moving away from him, it's not gonna play out that well, and it's gonna look bad. So I mean, he's sort of juggling these two things. Obviously, they've got lawyers on the ground. They're gonna think about this long and hard tonight. Maybe that's what they're doing, but on the internet, it's don't concede.
Okay, I guess it's back. It reminds me, Pat, so much in a very different time of Dick Nixon's problem back in '60. Mm-hmm. He hadn't lost the race when he went to bed, and yet he had to be a citizen about it and keep the republic together. And he did what he did.
Exactly, and there were 8,000 votes in Illinois, and everybody knew it was a crooked situation there. The votes in Texas with landslide Lyndon.
But he could never prove it.
Well, they probably could have investigated it, proven it. Earl Mazo probably would have.
Sure, I've gone through those numbers in that book I wrote. I know, but the problem is you had Texas with a one-party situation back then.
Sure.
You didn't have poll watchers. You didn't have anybody to check.
And there were problems even in Missouri, which was 8,000. But Nixon felt that, look, we go through this, you tear the whole thing apart, you discredit the presidency, you divide the country. Let it go.
What about Kerry's situation? Do you think he has the same moral situation?
I think I think we ought to watch Ohio and see it go 98, 99, and 100% of the vote in. Then we'll be down to the provisional ballots, and it seems to me just implausible to the point of impossibility that 2/3 of the provisional ballots will be qualified and Kerry will get every single one of them. And at that point, if I were Kerry, I would look at it, call in my advisors. I would get this thing done at noon tomorrow if that's the situation that we find. But I would not do it tonight.
Are provisional ballots, though, the same as the alternate ballots that they were talking about later? All these people that are in line hours after the polls are supposed to close.
No, I don't think they are.
I don't think they are.
I think that's a whole separate category of votes.
And we don't know how many of those there are out there, and they were saying they won't be able to count them tonight.
What's an alternate ballot?
The polls were supposed to close. There were still people in line, and they, instead of
I know
they
those
handed out paper
they were
ballots.
paper alternate form, but they had the same constitutional quality as an actual ballot. I mean, people voted in line that day and they voted.
The question is, how many of them are there, and have they been counted?
Yeah, we don't know that they've been counted yet, because the initial word was they wouldn't
we don't
be
know
counted
how many
tonight.
there are either, do we?
Yeah. So this,
Let me go right now to Martin Savage, to another state where there's obviously a possibility for a conclusion tonight or not a conclusion. Let's take a look at Wisconsin, which it's out there. Let's go to Martin Savage out there in Madison, Wisconsin. How's it look out there for a Kerry victory tonight?
It's looking pretty good at this particular hour. The way it breaks down is about 90% of the vote has now been counted here in the state of Wisconsin, and with 10% left, it looks like it's Milwaukee County that is the last to come in because of very heavy voting, very heavy voter turnout in areas of the city, and that's a Democratic stronghold. So it looks like the last remaining 10% is going to break very much more in the favor of Senator Kerry. However, that being said, let me point out one interesting fact. There are some areas in the city of Milwaukee where they say that they had a voter turnout today of 115%. Now, how do you get that? Well, essentially what they say happened was you had the pre-registered people who came up and everybody voted, and then you had those who showed up and registered. This is the state that has same-day voter registration. You could show up today, register, and vote today, and they believe a lot of people did just that. 115%. That's pretty doggone good.
When you have same-day registration, I'm not familiar with what happens, but when you do, how do you make sure a person's from the area, from the precinct?
Well, the way it is supposed to work is, number one, you're going to show up with a valid ID of some sort, preferably a driver's license, and then you need some sort of utility bill. And the utility bill is basically to say that you have been a resident of the state of Wisconsin for the last 10 days. And that is it. That's all you need, essentially, to say that now you will pre-register or register and you cast your vote at the same time. Now,
if it's that rigorous, how can you have over voting then if it's that rigorous?
Well, a lot of people are saying that in some of the areas, specifically around the city of Milwaukee, that the registration to begin with was perhaps not, well, let's say under the very best of conditions, or that they had a full understanding of how many people they had in their particular ward or precinct.
Oh, wow. Anyway, tonight, you think that the Kerry vote is moving toward a majority in that state, in Wisconsin, and we'll have at least one state marked up. Do you have any sense of when this is going to get done tonight?
No. I mean, it should be done within a matter of hours, but then I would have to say no.
I have to tell you, a matter of hours is about 10 tomorrow morning. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us, Martin Savage from Madison, Wisconsin. It's great to have you. Let me know, so there's one state that could finish up in the next 6 or 7 hours. But I tell you, it is amazing the silence we're getting. We have a lid on the Kerry campaign. How about a lid on Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, New Mexico, Nevada, Hawaii, and New Hampshire? And they're still voting in New Hampshire. My God, you could go around door to door with a clipboard and have it done by now. I don't know what's going on up there. And we still don't know about Tom Daschle fighting for his life. Apparently he's several votes behind out there in South Dakota. Again, a state that's so small that you should be able to get a tabulation fairly early.
Daschle has, apparently brings out the Indian vote from the reservations. My guess is this is probably what they're working with right now. He's behind by a few thousand votes out there.
Well, let's take a look right now. There it is right now.
What do they got?
He is, in fact, down by 2%, 183. He's trailing by 8,000 votes, roughly 8,100 votes. That would not be a lot of votes, except in South Dakota. That's a lot of votes, 8,000 votes. Yeah. It's 2% of the, as I said, that's more than a CD, much more than a congressional district. There it is. So that one is at 97. 3% of that vote to be counted.
That looks like a loss.
Well, let's do the math while we're up there. 3% of
less than 400,000, 12,000. You'd have to get almost all the votes, wouldn't he? No,
yeah,
you would have to get 3/4 of the votes.
3/4 of the vote.
4/5, yeah.
We're getting good at this, aren't we?
Very good.
Okay, 3/4 of the vote for Tom Daschle. He probably knows their names right now, and he's calling them up. Where are you? Because it is, in fact.
Who should pay the tip tonight after?
What's that?
Can you also calculate tips?
No, I know how to do it. It's easy. Anyway, we have a situation developing tonight whereby, let's go through it, so people who have joined us now recognize the fact that Michigan with 17 electoral votes, Minnesota with 10, Wisconsin with 10, Iowa with 7, New Mexico with 5, Nevada with 5, Hawaii with 4, and New Hampshire with 4, and they haven't reported a victor.
I think Hawaii's been called for Kerry.
Hawaii has been called to Kerry. Yeah. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 states holding 27, 37, 43, 48, 53, 57, right? 57 electoral votes.
I think got 58, but right up there.
9, 14, 21, 31, 41. You're right. 58. Mm-hmm. Okay, we got 58 electoral votes, which is clearly enough to elect either one of these guys, right? Mm-hmm. Isn't that interesting?
It's enough to give Kerry a tie, assuming Bush keeps Ohio.
So there's two reasons for Kerry to stay in this race and not concede. One is the overall look at the states we have right now that still haven't reported a winner. Right. They're still out there. And, of course, the contention by the Kerry folk that somehow they can pull out a victory in Ohio thanks to either a recount, a complete count, a recount, or these provisional ballots.
Yeah, but the likelihood is it's going to be, it's not going to be, the likelihood of a tie is fairly remote given Bush's lead in New Mexico and Nevada, which will take him over, and Ohio would take him back and throw Kerry over.
Let's go right now to Bill Richardson, the governor of New Mexico, one of the states. No, we haven't. We've already heard from it, right? Let me go to Governor Richardson. Thank you for joining us, Governor. What happened in New Mexico today?
Well, Chris, right now we've just gotten reports. Santa Fe County, which is a very Democratic county, we've picked up close to 24,000 votes in the last few minutes, and that gives us probably 10,000 down from the president. If you look at your projections, I think you had New Mexico down 30,000 votes. We're down maybe.
Let's put up that board 7, for New Mexico, and let's, Governor. Let me get it up there, and then we'll see. There it is. We have 279,968 to 251,524.
It's 28,000.
28,000. We picked up about 20,000 in the last few minutes from new vote counts in Santa Fe County, which previously hadn't been counted. And now some of the precincts in the Navajo reservation, heavy turnout in the Indian areas. So I would expect New Mexico won't be settled tonight, but most likely early in the morning. So I wouldn't count New Mexico out for Senator Kerry. I think we may squeeze it out as we did 4 years ago. I've been in many elections in the state, and those rural Hispanic Democratic counties, Native American, Santa Fe, come in way at the end. And there's also some votes out in Las Cruces, which is southern New Mexico, where President Bush has been strong. But if there's one area that is strongest for Democrats, it's Las Cruces because of the large Hispanic population.
I see. So you still think there's a prospect to make up this deficiency, Governor, and win it for the senator from Massachusetts? Yes, I do think so, Chris. I do think so. I think that it's too fluid out here. There are too many votes out that haven't been counted. Some absentees, some early voting. It's not over yet here. Okay, let me ask you, before we leave you to Governor on the phone, do you think politically it's important, not just numerically, but politically for John Kerry to keep the fight open and not to concede tonight? Yes, because there is no certainty in all of these numbers that are floating out there, Chris, and I think 4 years ago there was basically a concession too early by our candidate, and Senator Kerry is right to basically say we need to wait till tomorrow. That's what John Edwards said. That makes sense. I can just tell you in New Mexico, it's just not over yet, and most everyone will agree with me. These votes are being monitored by both sides in Santa Fe County, for instance, the ones that I mentioned, where we picked up close to 20,000 votes in the last 30 minutes. So in Ohio, I look at those numbers. You just don't know. There's no question the president has a lead there. But Nevada, I do think these are the states that I've concentrated on in registering Hispanics. Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, very competitive. Right. These are areas where Democrats need to spend more time in cultivating. And again, that Hispanic vote is moving our way, at least in those 3 states. I don't know about the rest of the country. Okay, it's great to hear from you. Thanks for the call tonight, Governor Bill Richardson of New Mexico. Let's go to Josh Mankiewicz, who's in Santa Fe. Josh, what do you think of that report from the governor about these new votes that have just come in, the 24,000? Is that news to us all?
It is news to us here at the Secretary of State's office. That, of course, does not mean that it's not true. Governor Richardson probably knows his state a lot better than the rest of us do, certainly those of us who are just here covering this election. But, you know, this race has been at about a 29,000, 30,000 margin for President Bush for a while now. Governor Richardson always predicted that if they won, if the Kerry forces won, it would only be about a 1% victory. He was never predicting any more than that. The one thing I can add to what the governor said is that the state workers here say that of the 190 91,000 absentee ballots that were out. Still about 70,000 still have to be counted. So there's a good chance that the sum of that margin could be made up, if not all of it, particularly if Governor Richardson is correct and that margin has now been cut from 30,000 to about 10,000, Chris.
Are people, Josh, still voting, still counting out there, I should say, at this time in the night?
Oh yeah, they're still counting. In fact, we've been promised some sort of like preliminary number. We haven't even got that yet. I mean, they're still working away at the early vote and the actual returns and the absentee vote, which, as you know, this time was absolutely huge, much bigger than anything New Mexico had ever experienced before. What's not going to be counted tonight are the provisional ballots. There may be more than 10,000 of them. It'll take a while to certify those and add them to the count. But 70,000 absentee ballots were still out there about a half hour ago when I checked with the Secretary of State's office, and that's enough to influence the outcome of a race that's at 30,000 votes, or, if you believe the governor, at 10,000 votes.
Okay, thank you very much, Josh Mankiewicz out in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
If you got 70,000 out, of those, Kerry would have to win 49,500, leaving Bush with 20,500. That would make up the 30,000, but that's winning basically 5 to 2 for Kerry in the ballots that are out there. It's doable, but not likely, because the last count we just saw go up, Bush went up about 1,000 votes. So they're not coming in the way Richardson says.
Yeah, it's coming in more for the president. It seems like these states that we're waiting to hear from and waiting to get a final count from, nothing seems to be turning in directions. You want to take a look at Nevada right now?
Yeah.
Let's go look at Nevada right now and see how that's doing. Let's look at the board for Nevada. Okay, George W. Bush. These are so consistent. This country is amazing in the way there's a pattern here. 51%, 48%. Obviously, 90% of voting there, 90% of the precincts reporting Bush over Kerry, 51 to 48% with these, again, relatively small numbers.
The question with Nevada is has Las Vegas reported yet? Because the Las Vegas area really is the blue area, and the rest of the state, all of the rest of the state is red. So unless we've got a bunch of Las Vegas votes yet to come, it's going to be George Bush.
Okay, we're going to go right now and go to Keith Olbermann for some updates on the governor's races. And, of course, taking a look once again at that Senate composition that's taking shape right now. Keith?
Yeah, Chris, I actually have results and ones that are not likely to be contested in any way. Let's start with the governor's seat, the open seat in Missouri, after Claire McCaskill, the Democrat, the state auditor, had beaten the incumbent Bob Holden in the primary. She herself is then defeated by the Secretary of State for Missouri, Matt Blunt. That is now called by NBC News a Republican takedown of the governor's chair in Missouri. There are also 3 measures to give final scores on in the Measure 36 balloting in Oregon, which again is a definition of marriage as between a man and a woman, one of 11 propositions nationwide tonight. This one has passed by a comparatively small total, but now you see it. It's 11-4-11. Arkansas, Georgia, Kentucky, Michigan, Mississippi, Montana, North Carolina, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon now, and Utah, all of them 11-4-11, approving those same-sex marriage measures. And then one more to report that has been projected by NBC News. In Oregon, medical marijuana, expanding the existing medical marijuana program has gone down to defeat, according to our projections, with 80% of the actual vote in. So, actual results. Chris, back to you.
Thank you very much, Keith Olbermann, my colleague in Counting Tonight. We're going to come right back after this. Let's take a commercial break from here from Democracy Plaza. It's getting a little noisy here, but we're going to persist in the vote count tonight.
It's been a long night, but we've waited 4 years for this victory. We can wait one more night. John Kerry and I made a promise to the American people that in this election, every vote would count and every vote would be counted.
just heard the Democratic anthem for 3:30 in the morning Eastern Time, the morning after the presidential election. We waited 4 years for this victory. We can wait another night. That was John Edwards being the cheerleader in the end game of the Democratic campaign for president. Let's go right now to Brian Williams and find out what happened to this campaign as it moved into Election Day. Brian.
Well, Chris, for sure, a lot of Kerry aides were not hoping or expecting to be in this situation at 3:28 a.m. And so we've been deconstructing some of the numbers. We've been looking specifically in our exit polling numbers at an erosion in the traditional Democratic base that hurt John Kerry at the polls today. Latinos have been in the Democratic column for some time, as you know, and while Senator Kerry won overall in that group, he did not do as well as Al Gore did 4 years ago. Both campaigns invested heavily in courting the Hispanic vote. 4 years ago, Hispanics made up 7% of voters nationwide. Tonight, they are 9% of the American total. And the president, who, let's not forget, is bilingual, is from a border state and has a Hispanic relative in his family by marriage, increased his share of the Hispanic vote from the 2000 race from 35 up to 42%. And at the same time, Kerry's share of the Hispanic vote diminished by 7 points from what Al Gore took in 2000, from 62% down to 55. The president also increased his support in every state with a large Hispanic population, even winning majorities in his home state of Texas and the battleground state of Florida. Now, turning to the group women. Back in the 2000 election, there was a big gender gap, as we all remember, in the vote for president. Al Gore won the women's vote by 11 percentage point gap. Today, John Kerry was only able to win women as a group by 5 points. Part of the reason for that, we talked about this before this election, married women went for Bush by a significant margin, 54 to 45, and a lot of those have been dubbed so-called security moms. On the other hand, single women were largely behind John Kerry, with close to 2/3 of that vote going for him and about 1/3 supporting Bush. The issues that matter most to women tonight also linked to marital status. Married women ranked moral values as the most important issue compared to single women who thought the nation's economy, job situation was the most important issue. Notably, Iraq was not one of the top 3 issues for women at all as they cast their votes and then answered questions from our exit pollsters. Chris, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Brian. That was fascinating. And I think I do want to talk about something I've often been fascinated by over the last 20, 30 years since Ronald Reagan, the gender gap, and how it continues to play a small part, but not a big part of our lives, and specifically single women. Ron?
Yes?
Explain. Single women are Democrats. Why?
Well,
married women tend to be more conservative.
Yeah, they're younger. I think you have true. You get married, you have kids. You have kids, you start worrying about kids. You start worrying about kids' future. You're not thinking about yourself so much. One thing about that, though, is that you would think that married women with children, particularly older children, would be concerned about the war in Iraq because they'd be worried about sending their kids to fight in Iraq. But apparently not so much.
This is the smallest gender gap, male-female gender gap we've seen in decades for a Democrat and Republican. This is extraordinary that he only won women by 5%.
Yeah, but what's interesting is single women, it doesn't matter whether they've never been married, whether they're divorced or widowed, how old they are.
That's true.
They tend to be more Democratic because they tend to be more economically vulnerable.
And while we're having this conversation, which I consider protein, we're going to be running in front of your screen right now the victories by the president and by the challenger in the Electoral College. Let's watch them. I'm sorry, Didi, your turn.
No, I didn't know where that was going, Chris.
Now, where it's going is where I wanted to take it, because I do love this topic. I love it. I mean, it used to be, you could say safely that education, women are always the ones most attentive to the homework, most attentive to enriching the children's lives, thinking about how they're becoming full adults. They're worried about medicine. They're worried about the shots the kids have had. Husbands tend to be out to lunch on these topics. Men, on the other hand, lock the door at night because they're the line of defense if anything happens. Men are very conscious of lights being turned off at night because they're the ones that are supposed to have the loot at the end. You know, they're supposed to have it when you're 90 years old. So they turn up the lights every night hoping that they'll save a few nickels. Women are thinking about this. Is true.
This is true.
And I think I can imagine that. I have turned off 30 lights at night. I'm so concerned about it because I figure it's my retirement plan. I will have some money left over if I turn off enough lights.
Right.
Women worry about children today. They worry about their parents today. They worry about you if you're the husband lucky enough to be one. They know what's in the health care program. They know what's in the pension. They know everything. Men know nothing. Except how to turn out the lights, how to lock the doors at night. And if there's a sound in the middle of the night, nobody ever says to the husband, I just heard a noise, let me check.
Right.
They always say, did you hear that? Like in a monster movie, and you're supposed to say, yeah, I heard it, and you're supposed to go downstairs and die because you're not supposed to have a gun, right?
With your baseball bat.
With your baseball
Yeah.
bat. I mean, it's a traditional notion of insanity. But this is why I figure men like Reagan, the old man, and why men like people like, Alan, what's his name? The guy used to be on MASH. Alan Alda. They like sensitive men.
Chris, there's a point here. When women get married to men, the two of them tend to start voting very much together and get very close in their politics. Sure, I mean, and I think when the women get married to the men, and the men, I think,
that's if you meet your wife in a campaign like you did.
No,
that's
no, there are more. But if you meet them when, say, in college, and as you grow older, you grow more together in your politics. And I think as the men are much more Republican, and so I think the women tend to move toward it. When they're single and independent, they're voting their own minds, they're voting their independence.
You are so 50s.
I think
you are
is
so
onto
50s.
something,
Does
though.
anybody believe that here?
You don't think women vote like their husbands?
Women are more vulnerable economically.
Right.
But you don't think women vote like their husbands?
Well, some do, and many don't. I mean, what we saw in this election was a tremendous number of ticket-splitting families where the women were voting Democratic and the men weren't.
Husbands do bully their wives into voting their way.
They do?
Yeah, they do, I think. More than the other way around.
But how do you know how they vote? How do you go in the booth? This is so fascinating. This is interesting.
I don't know about that.
I think it's getting more ridiculous here than outside. I mean, are you really saying that men bully their women into voting their way?
I don't mean literally. But yeah, there's more pressure. Oh, come on. A lot of strident,
men do tend
arguments
to pontificate about their views, I'll give you that much.
They're talking over who you're going to vote for, and then they come to a common conclusion, and as often as not, it's the man's conclusion. That's the world, Chris.
What, Steppard?
I think it's more important for husbands that their wives vote with them than it is for wives that their husbands vote with them.
Teeny, does Todd tell you how to vote?
No.
I'm not going to extend this any further because I disagree.
But no, you're right. I think that increasingly spouses disagree with each other. I think that increasingly younger couples can have different opinions.
The natural normal thing is I think they vote together.
By the way, the disparity between the married women and single women is 54-45 in married women, but 63-36 for Kerry and single women.
Right.
That's quite a margin.
Yeah, there is nobody to lock the door. There is no spouse to share the income. There is nobody to provide a safety net if something goes wrong. And so they look for the government to do it. They absolutely do.
So single women have lights on all night, obviously.
They have them on all night. It's unbelievable.
The government
They also don't. They do lock their doors, though. They just don't have somebody else to do it for them.
They have to do everything themselves, which is that much different than being married.
They look to the government when they don't have the man. They look to the government to do those functions you described, and they depend upon government. Look at women on welfare. They depend upon it for the income, for the education of the kids. All the things were once done by the man in the house. It's quite natural.
That is, let me just suggest something. Women have to work. Most of them work where they do have to work. They work anyway, whether they want to or not. They work. Let's just leave it at that. I don't want to get politically incorrect here. Women work. They have to deal with bosses, stockholders, customers, everybody that men have to deal with. They have to deal with their husbands, have to deal with their children. Then they have to make ends meet because they have to go to work, but they have to get somebody to take care of the kids. Child care. Number two, they don't make a ton of money, so they have to pay for kids. They have to hope that the public schools are good enough.
That's right.
They don't have a lot of money to give their parents. They got to count on Social Security. They count on the things that most people count on, but they have a little more stress on them because they're responsible both to bosses, husbands, kids, and stockholders, customers, and all that. It's a tough thing being a woman.
The government is indispensable to poor women. It's a simple fact of life. Poor single women, the government has become indispensable once the man is gone.
Even single women who aren't poor, who may be one paycheck away from real trouble and they've got kids.
They depend on government.
And
That's exactly
they
right.
want to know the
Whoever
safety
increased
net
the
is there.
divorce rate,
make the
increased the
healthcare
Democratic
decisions
vote.
for their families. Women are much more involved in healthcare decisions, and certainly women with children are.
Right. You remind me, remember the guy, what's his name, Sam Levinson, who once said that me and my family, I make all the big decisions in my family, and my wife makes all the little decisions. She decides where we live, where we go for religious services, where we go on vacation, things like that, what schools to get to. I make the big decisions, like whether we let Red shine in the UN. But you took that seriously, didn't you? Let's go to Nora O'Donnell, because the lid is not on at the White House at the president's re-election campaign. Let's go there right now to Nora O'Donnell of NBC News. Nora.
Yes, Chris, they are burning the midnight oil here at the White House. Highly unusual, certainly for a president who likes to get to bed early. He is still awake. All the lights still on here at the White House. The president's motorcade still waiting in case the president decides to head over to the Ronald Reagan building. Interesting, we just ran into Vice President Dick Cheney, who is also here. He said he was walking back over to his office to await developments. So he's still awake here, awaiting things with the president. The last time we saw the president tonight was over 6 hours ago. The president upstairs in his residence invited reporters up with his family, appearing very relaxed, laughing, saying he thought he was going to win, and also saying very confidently that he thought it would be over tonight. He was joined by his mother and his father, his twin daughters. Just spoke very briefly with reporters, sort of a mood-setting session, if you will, and also an opportunity for this White House to project a sense of self-confidence, certainly at a time when many people thought that the exit polls were not heading in their direction, when the campaign was saying, well, we see results that are heading in our direction. The mood, however, now has turned from celebration to, as my colleague David Gregory put it, to irritation. Many people sort of frustrated with the fact that Kerry's folks are contesting what's going on in Ohio. In fact, we just got a late press release from the president's campaign by Senators Mike DeWine and George Voinovich, the two Republican senators from Ohio. Incidentally, Voinovich was reelected today, and they put out a statement saying, based on our experience in Ohio politics, we believe the president's lead in Ohio is clear and that it cannot be surmounted. Senator Kerry should concede defeat and spare the country the turmoil of another drawn-out election. That's the word from the two Republican senators from Ohio on letterhead from the Bush-Cheney campaign. Significant. They're already starting to send these signals from the president's campaign that Kerry should spare this country the turmoil. Chris?
Okay, thank you, Nora O'Donnell at the White House. Let me ask you this, just to make sure we're clear on this. Do we have 270 electoral votes for the president yet?
No, 269.
So why would the other guy concede on that point alone?
Well, now Reuters has a bulletin that the White House is planning to declare victory if the president wins either Nevada or New Mexico.
Right, that's what we've been hearing for an hour. Right. But for them to start putting out a testy letter now, suggesting there's something impolite about Kerry, I think is pushing this thing.
The president's lead is growing in Ohio, Chris. It's now up to 144,000. What we down to 2% of the votes out. Pardon?
We don't have 270 electoral votes for the president, so you have no right, it seems to be under common sort of understandings of politics, to demand a concession.
I think that's right. We described the tactic earlier. It is to be presumptive about it and to put Kerry on the defensive, which is exactly what they're doing with
But
these
you ought to
statements.
be presumptive. I agree with Chris. You don't be presumptive until you got the electoral votes with Ohio.
Yeah.
If you're over the top, then you say, we have won Ohio and we're over 269. He ain't there yet. You're correct.
Yeah. You can't do it just because the caterer is getting a little testy over at the Reagan building, right?
It would be interesting. My guess would be they sent somebody, since he sent Edwards, you would send not the president, but Cheney, I would think, over to issue a sort of a provisional statement of victory, rather than have the president go out there.
Let's get a gut check here from Ann Thompson in the decision room. We've been wrestling for a couple of hours now, trying to figure out how these preliminary ballots are going to be. Hi, Ann. How are these preliminary ballots going to be tested? Under what timetable? So we'll know if we get a clear result, at least from Ohio, in a reasonable amount of time.
Well, we will know hopefully in an hour or so how many provisional ballots were cast today in Ohio, but they won't start counting them until November 13th. Why is this a 10-day delay? Because during that time, they also get in overseas absentee ballots. There's a 10-day grace period for those ballots, and then once all those ballots are in and the provisional ballots have been certified that they indeed were cast by registered voters, then the county officials open up those ballots and begin to count them and then send their tabulations here to the Secretary of State. But that's why there's this 10-day delay.
Okay, yeah, and thanks a lot for filling us in on that critical detail of tonight's end game. Thank you very much, Ann Thompson, watching what's happening out there in Ohio right now. We're going to come right back after this commercial on MSNBC here at Democracy Plaza and Rockefeller Center, where we're keeping an eye on this late end game, as we've got to call it, because it's not over yet.
Going to the polls right now.
We have an extraordinary piece of litigation coming out of Ohio.
The city of brotherly love, where tonight there is some concern about whether or not all of the votes that have been cast are actually going to be counted.
And now we are told the NAACP has filed suit to keep
potentially tens of thousands of absentee ballots,
alleging that voters have been intimidated.
We see history repeat itself this time around.
If you figured it out, it would probably come.
We're back here at Rockefeller Center at Democracy Plaza. It'd be nice if we could see. I think the one way we're going to be leaving here in several minutes. I'd like to end by looking at something that I've looked at through history books through my life, and that's final votes. Let's take a look right now, if we can, at the popular vote right now for President Bush's reelection and the vote for his challenger. It's about 51% plus. Let's take a look at right now. That's 51%. You know, it's so interesting. That's what I thought it would be. And it's so funny. Before all this rock and rolling, I was thinking to myself, 51-48, because I thought it wasn't going to be a really dramatic victory, just based upon the mood of the country. And then I did think that the president would win, and it's fair for me to say this now. We can all say what we think and have thought before. That's about right. I was thinking Nader would get one, Kerry would get... but, you know, here's the interesting thing. The president campaigned like hell the last year, especially the last couple of months, to get his number above 50%. Because he was always about 50.
They really wanted to win this.
And he really wanted to get it, and he got it up
happened.
at one point. John Kerry kept trying to get his vote above 45%, which, as somebody said tonight, anybody could have gotten, because it was the anti-Bush vote. It was the hardcore Democratic anti-Bush vote. So there you see John Kerry succeeding somewhat in the debates. Thank God. If he hadn't won those debates, thank God for him, he would not be up at 48. That's 48 is probably the function of having kicked it up by 3 or 4 points, right, Craig?
And that's the GOP turnout machinery was everything that they advertised it to be. And I was cynical. I didn't think they had it in them, but they did. They have caught up with the Democrats in turnout machinery. And that's what those numbers are showing.
Without having big city machines.
Yeah.
They don't have those old-time organizations like they do have them.
They've got governors.
They've got governors. Patrick Buchanan. Let's go around the room. I want to talk about that number, because we'll argue about this electoral vote number for days now. It looks like the popular vote is what the world sees. It's what most people see. 3-point spread for the president. About what you would have expected, Pat, a couple weeks ago?
A couple of weeks ago, before the debates, yeah, I predicted 50. Frankly, frankly, I predicted exactly this, 51-48.
That's what I've been thinking. Vice President Cheney said the other night, 52-47, which he has to say. He's got to give himself a little more edge. But I think it's about what he would have expected without all that Sturm and Drang.
Andrea, I'm sort of working the math here. It looks like about 112 million votes, Chris. People talking about 125 million. We're way over, way over. It would be interesting to see what it would have been if we'd gotten a lot more votes.
And this is where it makes it tough for John Kerry to pursue this non-concession strategy, although he did, we still don't have 270, so he shouldn't concede.
You mean when you're in the hole for the popular vote?
It's not like Al Gore. He didn't win the popular vote.
Well, I think that's also the case that the president won without the advantage of those huge states like California and New York, where he can roll up the score. The East Coast and the West Coast states. He had to roll up that score in the Midwest.
I made a round of calls with Democrats very quickly, those that weren't in the campaign that are working for people who might want to run for president in 2008. I don't think Kerry's going to have the support of the party around him as much as Al Gore did to contest this election, if that's how it pans out.
Why not?
I think a lot of them are ready to run themselves. Mark Warner of Virginia, for example, the governor there. Howard Dean, perhaps. There are plenty of folks in a three-point stance to run for this.
You've popped a question. If John Kerry doesn't find a way to win this in the Electoral College, does that mean that he's never going to be president? Because he's not going to run again. He's not going to get the nomination again.
I don't see him going again with John Kerry. This was ideal. President's had terrible news for a year. Abu Ghraib, all this Iraq things going on, the economy, all these manufacturing jobs lost. If you can't win it when you're dealt that hand, then you try to get a new hand.
This is great news for political junkies if the president wins this re-election, because we have two open races in both parties now for the nomination in 2008.
In the short run, it's good news for the president, because now he has a mandate of a majority vote. How many Democrats have had majority votes? Count them.
No,
when's the last one?
He's got a mandate and he's got a stronger.
Carter did, didn't he, against Ford?
Right. Yeah,
Carter
first time.
Ford.
I'm telling you, it's a long way back. That's more than a quarter of a century. A Democrat has not got a majority vote. Bill Clinton got up to 49. If this president walks out of this race with a 42% majority in the popular vote, he's won. It's a victory. Ron?
Well, yeah, and let's remember that this president, even when he lost the popular vote and won a disputed election, acted as if he had a mandate when he entered office. I mean, he didn't go in there and say, well, gee, maybe I should make some concessions on the environment because I can read the polls and I see most people disagree with my policies there. No, he said, screw it. I'm in here now, and I'm going to,
Now he'll be running for the history books now. If this president's reelected, he's running for the history books. So it'll be interesting to see if he plays to the right wing of the party like he had been to win this reelection. We may see the compassionate conservative.
One thing we've learned about second terms. You've learned it. Second terms are fraught with peril for the following reasons. Second-rate staff. Inevitably, you don't get the guy you got the first time. You get the guy you turned down the first time. A cabinet gets very hubristic, as George Stephanopoulos would say, hubristic. They get very arrogant, and therefore you get into trouble. Whether it's Bernard Goldfein and what was that, the mink coat or whatever it was, the refrigerator, Vicuna coat, or it's Watergate, or it's Iran-Contra, or it's Monica.
Scandals.
Things happen bad in second terms.
Scandals hit in second terms, but they don't tend to hit if you control both houses.
There's the difference.
As Richard Nixon would say, the most important prize of the race for Congress is the subpoena power, right? And he noticed when he won re-election in 1972, everyone else was celebrating. Nixon said, oh my God, once again, I don't get the subpoena power. They're coming at me. Yeah.
They've got more support in the House and the Senate. It turns out that Tom DeLay's strategy in Texas turned out to be really, really terribly important. But at the same time, he's got some big challenges. The situation in Iraq. Right now, they're not even sure they can hold this election in January as scheduled. He's got some tough things to face.
Be careful. As your husband would tell you, as your husband might tell you, there is a sinking dollar out there, frankly, with his trade deficit and current account deficit and fiscal deficit. We're borrowing about $1 trillion a year. There is no way the dollar, I think, can survive that. Everybody's projecting it's going down.
In my area, which is not the economy, and in terms of foreign policy, he's got some really big challenges and opportunities. You've got an ailing Arafat, a power vacuum on the Palestinian side, the potential
but
for
after
peace
he did what he did
negotiations or
with the
greater
Jewish
violence.
vote, with the Jewish vote in Florida,
he's locked in.
If he's locked in, he is Sharon's man.
No, he isn't. He's reelected. You don't know real politics. He
Well,
doesn't need anybody.
when was the
Now, by
last
the way,
time-
the Chinese curse was, you get what you ask for. We have borrowed so much money from China now. We got what we asked for. We owe it to them. Anyway.
By the way, what about the senator from the state of New York?
You betcha.
Hillary. Well,
When you look
she
at the
hasn't
Democratic
exactly busted her butt for the guy running this time,
The
has
Democrats
she?
are taking
We'll be
some
right. We
fire.
got to go right now to Lester Holda and talk about what's going on in Iowa right now. Lester.
Well, what's going on at the decision desk right now is looking at some of these races yet to be called. I'm sure a lot of folks, Chris, are playing along at home, watching the numbers on the screen, wondering why some races aren't being called. Let's talk about Iowa right now. 99% of the vote in. You see that President Bush has a lead there, but look at some other outstanding numbers that you don't see on that screen. According to the Secretary of State in Iowa, there are about 20,000 ballots that have yet to be counted there, traditional ballots. On top of that, the Secretary of State says there are about 30 to 50,000 uncounted absentee ballots. Add in another 10 to 15,000 uncounted provisional ballots. And that leads you to the same conclusion our decision desk came to, which is this one is way too close to call. Another one that folks may be watching, New Mexico. The president has a lead there, but there's some question in that race as to how many outstanding ballots there are. We had numbers ranging from 100,000 to 200,000. So again, with that many ballots that may be uncounted out there, way too close to call in New Mexico. That's a story from the decision desk. Let's send it back to you now.
Thank you, Lester Holt, for that latest on this very complicated ending to the evening, because neither man, even if you count Ohio, has 270. And that is a fact. And so we can't expect a concession until one of the men has that by the other guy.
And the numbers in New Mexico that Lester just showed,
that wiped out a 30,000 vote lead, went down to about less than 2,000.
2,000.
Richardson
So
was right.
Richardson right about those outstanding votes that had come in, the 24,000. And so we have an interesting situation. We're going to come back right afterwards and run the numbers so everybody can write down what they went to bed with tonight. It may not be what you wake up with tomorrow. We're not going to have a presidential victory tonight. We're not going to have a party. We're not going to have a concession. None of that tonight. An unsatisfactory ending, by the way, for both sides as we go to break right now. A commercial break from Democracy Plaza here at Rockefeller Center.
It's been a long night, but we've waited 4 years for this victory. We can wait one more night. John Kerry and I made a promise to the American people that in this election, every vote would count and every vote would be counted.
Welcome back. I'm here with Pat Buchanan and Craig Crawford and Andrea Mitchell and Ron Reagan to give you a wrap-up of what's happened so far for those of you who've woken up or those who've come home from work or just have turned the channel. Let's take a look at the map. It'll tell you exactly where we're at right now. 211 electoral votes for the challenger, the Democrat of Massachusetts, John Kerry. 269 votes, one short of the necessary 270 for the President of the United States, George W. Bush. That's where it stands right now. If you look at those gray states, you see the problem for ending this election tonight. Clearly, in Nevada, in New Mexico, in Minnesota, in Wisconsin, in Iowa, we have an interesting situation right now. Let's take a look at all of those states where the vote is too close to call. In Michigan, forever a Democratic state, less than 90% of the precincts in Minnesota, 91% of precincts reporting. You can see how close these numbers are. 96% of the vote in too close to call in the state of Wisconsin. They're again too close. You can see how close they are. They're just close everywhere. Iowa close with 99% of precincts in. Nevada, a smaller state, but same deal. They're hardly apart. New Mexico, same deal. That one is very close because of the recent uptick in the Democratic vote. In New Hampshire, even little New Hampshire, so close. Stunning results, not just in the country close, but close in so many states, from the large states to the small states, and especially the states that are still outstanding, and they haven't been able to get it resolved yet in those states tonight. Let's go to Jeannie Ohm, who's at the Bush-Cheney headquarters right now. Jeannie, it's great to talk to you at this strange time of the morning. Jeannie, is that the party that they were headed toward that they're not going to make it to tonight? I'm talking about the president and the vice president.
Well, let me tell you, Chris, the people here that are still here at this time at 4 o'clock in the morning, they are convinced that President Bush will be coming here. I was just listening to my colleague David Gregory saying that at this point, the plan is still for President Bush to come to the Ronald Reagan building. But obviously what they're waiting for is for perhaps a win in Nevada or New Mexico to put this victory out of mathematical reach for Senator Kerry. So that is still the holdup at this point. There is growing irritation on behalf of the president, those who are waiting to come here. And clearly this crowd, they've been patient all night long. They've had bands to entertain them for several hours now, but they are quite determined that they do want to see the president come here and declare victory. Now, we are told that even though Senator Kerry has not given a concession speech tonight, if in fact President Bush does come here, he will go ahead and declare a victory speech. Chris?
So they're expecting the president to declare victory, even though he's one vote short of the 270 needed to win the presidency.
Well, no, what they're waiting for is for either a win in Nevada or New Mexico before they then make that trip over here.
But they're not going to wait for John Kerry to throw in the towel, right?
Not at this point.
Okay, thank you. Great, Jeannie. Great report. You look so bright and wide awake. What is this?
Lots of coffee.
It's great to see you. Okay, let's go to James Sartori, who's up in Boston with the other side. We'll see if they've got any winks left to them. Let me go. James, great to see you in the middle of the morning here. I'm about to get up and do the Today Show, but I better go to sleep first. Let me ask you about up there. Is it just the lid's on? That's the way it is? They're not going to say nothing?
That's right. At this point, we've moved inside to the filing center, the press center, outside where it's raining, outside the Boston Public Library where the rally was going on. The party is over. They're tearing down all the barricades. The crowd is long gone. Though the party may be over, as you know, and we've been reporting, the Kerry campaign believes the election is not over. Senator Kerry, for much of the night, has spent his time at his Beacon Hill apartment conferring with his advisors, including Senator Edward Kennedy. However, Senator Edwards did come out and address the crowd before a couple of hours ago and had some really brief remarks, long expected, long anticipated. Here's some of what he had to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's been a long night, but we've waited 4 years for this victory. We can wait one more night. Tonight, John and I are so proud of all of you who are here with us and all of you across the country who have stood with us in this campaign. John Kerry and I made a promise to the American people that in this election, every vote would count and every vote would be counted. Tonight, we are keeping our word and we will fight for every vote. You deserve no less. Thank you.
I stand corrected. It actually was his entire statement. It was very brief, as you can hear. And as you mentioned at the outset, Chris, the campaign has put on a full lid, meaning no further comment. They did send out an email saying that Senator Edwards does speak for the entire campaign. There is no further word, but you can bet that no one is going to sleep at Kerry campaign headquarters, as well as his apartment. They're probably conferring with officials on the ground in places like Ohio, as well as other states, and plotting out what their next step will be. Now, obviously, because if the provisional ballots are counted and it takes a process of 10 days before it gets to that, it would be hard to believe they would wait 10 days. We can expect possibly more word from them in the morning. Chris, that's the latest here.
Okay, thank you, James Hattori. We've got to stop meeting like this at 10 after 4 in the morning. James Hattori. Let me go right now to Keith Oberman, who's got the latest numbers. He's going to run through them, and we'll run through what's left. Keith.
Surprisingly enough, Chris, there are some undecided races in both the Senate and the House. In fact, we only have right now a net gain through all the evening's activity in the Senate of one seat for the Republicans. They've gained 3 old Democrat seats, and the Democrats have taken 2 seats away from the Republicans. Salazar in Colorado, Obama in Illinois on the GOP side of things, Burr in North Carolina, DeMint in South Carolina, and Isaacson in Georgia. So the Republicans with a net gain of 1. Still too close to call. South Dakota, the second most contested race tonight, where Tom Daschle is behind by nearly 9,000 votes with 99% of the vote in, and yet this one has not been called. $35 million spent between the two sides on that one. In Florida, this one has still not been called with 99% in, and an 80,000 vote margin favoring at the moment the former HUD Secretary Mel Martinez over the Democrat Betty Castor. Kentucky, even though it is now, 7 hours since Jim Bunning made his acceptance speech for his re-election, a 22,000 vote difference with 99% of the vote in and no call in the Bunning-Mangiardo vote in Kentucky for the Senate. Louisiana is still a toss-up here with 100% of the vote in and a 400,000 margin vote for David Vitter. It is still too close to call. I will not go into the analysis of that because it eludes me entirely. In Alaska, the incumbent, Lisa Murkowski, appointed to that role when her father moved up from senator to governor in 2002, is just barely staving off Tony Knowles, and that one is too close to call. The governor's races, meanwhile, that are still too close to call in Montana. With Judy Martz retiring, it is Bob Brown, the Secretary of State, trailing the Democrat, the former Senate candidate Brian Schweitzer. Washington looking to succeed Gary Locke, the outgoing Democratic governor there. The race is indeed too close to call, and I'll use your line, Chris. Look at this. 98% of the vote in, and the margin of difference is 627 votes for the governor of the state of Washington. One more still too close to call in New Hampshire, where Craig Benson, the incumbent, is trailing by 14,000 votes with 4% uncounted yet, the Democratic businessman John Lynch. To go quickly through some of the key congressional races. In Texas, the Chainsaw Massacre, the realignment, the redistricting by the Republicans against the Democrats has largely succeeded. Louis Gohmert has defeated, our projection says, Max Sandlin, the incumbent in what is now District 1. In District 2, Nick Lampson, a Democrat, an incumbent, ousted by the former state district judge Ted Poe, the Republican, according to our projection. 100% of the vote in there. District 19, 2 incumbents because of the mergers and redistricting there. Neugebauer, the Republican, beating Charlie Stenholm, the Democrat, according to our projections. Pete Sessions, the Republican, in a similar all-incumbent race in District 32 over Martin Frost, the Republican, and the sole survivor in this group in District 17, Chet Edwards, the Democrat, who's been in the House since 1990, over Arlene Wolgamuth. And this new district, though, 59% Republican, still going, according to our projections, to Edwards. Around the country in the House, Phil Crane, the former Democratic, or Republican rather, candidate for president years ago, is now out of the House after serving in that 8th District of Illinois since 1969, losing out to Melissa Bean, according to our projections. The Georgia 12th Democratic District, which was key to the Democrats' hopes of possibly gaining some ground in the big margin of difference in the House, has in fact now is not yet called, even though the Democrat John Barrow is leading by about 9,000 votes with nearly all of it counted. Oregon District 1, David Wu, surviving a scandal from earlier in the year that was actually much earlier in his life, but reported earlier in the year, is about to be returned, according to our projection, out of the 1st District in Oregon. South Dakota at large, Stephanie Herseth, who replaced Bill Janclow after he resigned in the manslaughter conviction case. As you know, our projection there has Herseth defeating the Republican Diedrich. And in Louisiana, with a 5-person field, there will not be a runoff here. Bobby Jindal, who would become the first Indian American in Congress, is going to take District 1 in Louisiana. There will be a runoff in District 3 in Louisiana, and it will feature the son of the incumbent, who is retiring, Billy Towson, finishing atop the 6-person field with Charlie Melicon, the Democrat, That runoff will be at the beginning of December 4th. Hopefully we'll have the president in place by then. Louisiana District 7, there will also be a runoff between the Republican Bostony and the Democrat Mount, as no one succeeded in getting the requisite 50% there. California, no surprise here. Nancy Pelosi, House Minority Leader and an incumbent there since 1987, in a landslide over De Palma, the Republican, with 100% of the vote in. And a little family thing from Missouri in District 3. The son of Gene Carnahan and the late Governor Mel Carnahan, Russ Carnahan, has, by our projections, gained election to the House from District 3 in Missouri. So we don't have exact numbers yet on the makeup of the new House of Representatives, but the NBC News projection is that when all is said and done, 232 Republicans, 202 Democrats. This is given on a plus or minus 4 seats scale. So we're figuring somewhere of a margin between 26 and 34. We went into the night with the Republicans ahead by 22. So that, Chris, is everything else. Back to you.
Thank you very much. What a great summation for this time of the morning. Right now, that was Keith Olbermann with all the results coming in from the House, the Senate, and the governorships. Let's go right now to Brian Williams and try to get a sense of what we learned on the issues questions, the values questions, everything about our country you learned tonight. Brian, what stunned you, or what thought struck you after reading all this tonight?
Well, first of all, I'm always saying that those of us in the information business are so intent on trying to cover this stuff and call balls and strikes. I'm sitting here looking through Keith's list. Some of the lions of the House of Representatives have fallen, and there's some new names we're all going to have to get used to. Usually the information hits us, those of us in the industry, about 2 days later. I think what stands out tonight, and Chris, you talked about this with your panel, and I guess the former congressman who has his own show on MSNBC gets credit for saying this over and over and over like a mantra, that if the youth vote came out this year, a lot of people in the politics business said they were going to eat their shirts. And we can report that people will go back to traditional breakfasts when morning comes officially. The youth vote, for all the ballyhoo about all the new registrations, for all the excitement, ages 29 to 18, really did not materialize. It didn't move off the dime appreciably. The women's vote will end up being a fascinating dynamic, as patronizing as so many Americans found it when the media came up with expressions like soccer moms and NASCAR dads and now security moms. It looks like we're going to have to call that demographic something, because there is a security mom vote out there that spoke for George W. Bush, and they were largely married women with children. Chris?
Okay, and so we're going to, that's going to be our history. We're going to come out of this election. What about the overall turnout? Can you sell, or is it still too early? We can't get that from the exits.
You're not going to wrestle that out of me, because we can't wrestle it out of our very good chief of elections, because really turnout has to wait. It's one of the few questions that has to wait to be answered when we have a number, when we have total raw vote tallies, and we can stick them in a briefcase and look at all of them, 50 states, and we can look at military and absentees and all of that. So everybody's an agnostic on that one.
Speaking of agnostics, did you get a peek tonight going through all the voluminous reporting on the exit polling about, well, our religion, the Roman Catholic vote? Is it any different than it's been in the past, given the bishop's directives on abortion rights and that sort of thing?
With kudos for an artful segue at 4:14 a.m., Chris, I think those Americans who had, let's put it this way, the people in the blue states who don't travel a lot, who had yet to really get the memo on what America has become, let's say in the last decade, in the last 4 years since 9/11. The evangelicals are known as a dependable voting bloc. They came out today and last night, yesterday and last night, in a big number, 1 out of 5 voters in some races. You know, it will be said that religion played a major part in the Bush vote. And I know there are already conversations going on in the Democratic Party how they have to change. And one topic of conversation is they must make those Americans who identify themselves as religious, churchgoers, a minimum of 1 time per week. They have to make them feel less mocked and less kind of like they're patronized or kind of a bracket that's strange to the blue state Democrats, I guess.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian Williams, for a great report tonight on the way the Americans are thinking and the way they voted throughout the day across the country. Let me go back to our panel. We're going to be finishing up here quite soon. I do think it's amazing that we were all sold on this South Seas bubble, to make an historic reference, that there was going to be a new demographic voting, when in fact the same people tend to vote who always vote, which is, I think Pat Caddell, the pollster, once said, you have to get married, you have to settle down before you begin to vote. It's part of the way you grow up in America. We're going to go back and talk about that because that is a profundity we're all swallowing right now. We'll be back with after this break for a commercial here in the morning. It's 4:15 on the East Coast. It's still at Rockefeller Center here at the Democracy Plaza. We'll be back to finish up tonight and try to understand what we can from the remains of the day. Beautiful Rockefeller Center, and of course the reason for which this wonderful exhibit was put up here at Rockefeller Center was to celebrate the American people having an election. Of course, from every report we've gotten, we have access to every news source in the world. There's been no violence. We've had a re-election, it looks like, of a president based upon what looks to be and about to be some celebratory remarks by the president some point soon in the morning, even though he hasn't quite got the 280 yet. He needs 270 needs. But it looks like the president's probably going to get that 270 electoral votes, and he's probably going to win re-election. And probably sometime tomorrow, after a lot of Sturm und Drang, we're going to get a concession speech by the rather civilized Democratic challenger, and we all know him to be that. You know, we were talking earlier, I think we should coin it the Scarborough rule, nothing new under the sun, because tonight he preached to us, forget all this loose talk about young people between 18 and 29 voting. They just aren't going to do it because they never have. Pat?
Well, it's a great myth.
How many of the Pittsburgh Brigade were under 29?
Well, all of them up there. Under 29, they all came to New Hampshire. There was but they're talking about a national movement in the millions. It's the great myth of the youth revolution of 2004. It did not materialize. All the rock the vote and Bruce Springsteen and all of that. I'm sure it did a little something.
They went to the rally.
Yeah, they went to the rally. They went to the concert. They went to the concert, and then maybe they registered, but they really did not come out. They did not affect it. It did not happen.
Look at that number. Look at that. That's a hard number. That's based on the exit polling across the country by all the networks. And look at that. 18 to 29 age group. 2004-17. It is so incredible that all this hype should yield a flat line.
It's the 60-plus people who increased, Chris. They're the ones.
Maybe they like the music.
Yeah, I mean, that's
they probably like Springsteen better than the kids do. They remember him.
That's devastating for the Kerry campaign. Really was counting on a boost there, and they thought it would overcome their decision to basically forego the rural vote. And I think the rural vote is a big story out of this election, because if you look at the states that are left,
wasn't John Edwards detailed?
That was the problem. They thought John Edwards could handle that and going out and shooting some geese or something like that. But this is the problem with the Democratic Party. They are not connecting to the rural culture. When you write off the South, as this campaign, you're not just writing off the South. You're writing off rural voters in Wisconsin, in New Hampshire, all over the country. And I think that's something a lot of these Democrats from Boston don't understand.
But do you think the thing is that the 65 and plus voters cut for Bush, not for Kerry. These are supposed to be the people concerned about Social Security, the third rail of Democratic politics. And none of those populist arguments, none of the Social Security arguments reach them.
Maybe it's not so much red state, blue state, it's urban, rural, as Craig suggested.
And we don't have to rely on exit polls to see that. I mean, and the states that are left, that's why Kerry is not putting those states away, because he did not even have a message.
Here again, there is a clear pattern. Jimmy Carter was a peanut farmer. He actually did. When Jerry Rafshoon, my friend, went out to make movies of him for the ad campaign, he didn't pretend to be a peanut farmer. He was one. He really did wear overalls. He really did work in the field, and we went out to shoot him. And Bill Clinton, whatever we may think of him, really did grow up in Arkansas.
He
didn't grow up at Yale.
But that's it, Chris. When these fellas grow up in states like that, so whatever they believe, they're attuned to the culture of the state and they deal with it. Now, John Kerry in Massachusetts, he can take all of these positions, which are Dukakis progressives. I'm a card-carrying member of the ACLU. That's fine in Massachusetts, but when you go nationally, it's a jolt. But Clinton has been immersed in that culture, and so has Carter, and so has LBJ, so that they come out of it and they can deal with it.
Yeah. And the Democrats have an advantage on economic arguments to those rural voters, but they can't get to those arguments if they don't connect to the culture.
It's hard to sell the case that you're for someone if you're not of them, isn't it?
But I mean, West Virginia voters, they love Democrats. They love FDR's their hero down there. Yeah. But they like to fish and hunt, and their traditional values go to their little churches and things.
That was my clue tonight. When I saw West Virginia called so quickly, I thought it was going to be a tough night.
The other issue is moral values and faith.
In Missouri.
Faith and moral values. And Bill Clinton, remarkably, because he grew up in those churches in the South,
the Bible in and out,
was able to speak to those values.
And a particular kind of faith and a particular kind of moral values, and we could, get into the sort of semantic
before everybody in the Republican Party gets overly pious on us, you look at the candidate who's doing the best, Rudy Giuliani. He's from New York. He's from Queens, I guess. He's a guy who doesn't accept any of the value systems of the Republican Party, and yet he is the most served-up surrogate of the last couple of weeks for the president. How will he sell?
Here's what he'll do. I mean, he's got a wonderful story that he gave at his convention. It's about 9/11. And it's just about the firemen, and that will sell. But you can't go and deliver that every day in New Hampshire and Iowa. And the little old ladies are going to say, where do you stand on life?
Right, you've been through that.
Oh, I mean, they'll do it night and day and night and day. And on New Hampshire, it is guns. I mean, I remember I went up there with George, running against George Bush, Chris. A guy came up to me, he had a beard, and in a department store, I was buying some socks to go up to the North Country. He just said, where do you stand on gun control? And I just looked at him, I said, I'm against it. He said, good, I'll vote for you. That was it. And
I remember getting to one of your meetings up there in the far western New Hampshire one time with all these long-neck beer bottles and cigarettes. And I said, I think I know where these people are politically. I'm just guessing.
It's no accident that New Hampshire is still not decided.
Well, we have an election, and the more things change, the less they change, the more they're the same. And here it is, 2004. We're shooting into the 21st century on course, and women are now voting more like men. What are the comments?
But we're still not turning out the lights.
You're not turning out the lights, but you are in charge of the medical program, the meds and eds. And youth still don't vote till they get married, and that's the way it is, and maybe the way it will be.
You and I came into politics about the same time. I came in with Richard Nixon. We had 142 seats in the House, 38 in the Senate after the Goldwater debacle. Republican Party tonight, what's it going up to? 230 plus in the House, 54 Senate seats, the president's. I mean, the takeover from the New Deal generation is complete.
We're learning a lot here. I'll tell you, I love these
bloodletting in the Democratic Party.
We're coming right back. We're coming right back on MSNBC, still covering the remains of the day for MSNBC from Rockefeller Center.
Most people become aware of their septic system when they have a problem. You might see puddles in the yard from sewage popping up to the top of the ground. Using Rid X once a month will lessen the likelihood of having the yard torn up. I've always recommended Rid X, and I've never recommended anything else.
I run 2 miles a day. I work. I take care of my family, my business, myself. I fight for what I want. I never stop trying. I test. I test 4 times a day. I'm a daughter, a mother, a wife. I am a diabetic. I am a diabetic, and this is my meter.
The AccuCheck Compact System. No strip handling, finger or forearm test. Faster results. The one with the drum. AccuCheck. Live life. We'll fit in.
Most people become aware of their septic system when they have a problem. You might see puddles in the yard from sewage popping up to the top of the ground. Using Rid X once a month will lessen the likelihood of having the yard torn up. I've always recommended Rid X, and I've never recommended anything else.
AIDS has killed more children worldwide than there are in all the grade schools in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Washington, Atlanta, and Miami combined. The time to do something is now.
Comcast.
focused on community.
Before 1952, few survived open-heart surgery. Then, with funding in part by the American Heart Association, Dr. Forrest Dowdrill of Wayne State University and engineers from General Motors built a machine that pumped blood while the heart was repaired.
General Motors has been proud to partner with the American Heart Association for over 50 years.
And I'm alive because they have.
When our sons and daughters find themselves in harm's way, America's watching MSNBC. When heroes rise, when the world is rocked by winds of change, America's watching MSNBC. Whether it happens on the other side of the globe or right next door, turn to the nation's most trusted news source. America's watching MSNBC.
Going to the polls right now.
We have an extraordinary piece of litigation coming out of Ohio.
The city of brotherly love, where tonight there is some concern about whether or not all of the votes that have been cast are actually going to be
now
counted.
we are told the NAACP has filed suit
about
to keep
potentially tens of thousands of absentee ballots.
Alleging that voters have been intimidated.
We see history repeat itself this time around.
Well, we're getting that aerial view, which is so beautiful, of Rockefeller Center, courtesy of the Ohio-based blimp, Spirit of Goodyear. It's looking at the Empire State Building now. Isn't that quite a building? Where's King Kong now that we need him? Anyway, there's Rockefeller Center right now, of course, in Midtown Manhattan. It's a beautiful, beautiful architecture. And, of course, there's the skating rink down there where you can see the electoral map of the United States that has basically filled in, except for those states that are sort of in vanilla colored there that haven't. That's, of course, look at them. There's Nevada, New Mexico, and the Great Lakes states up there at the top. And little old New Hampshire still hasn't reported conclusively. But look at that. Look at the structure. We're here at night. In fact, it's now almost 5 o'clock in the morning, and we're still here. And I want to welcome all the stations picking us up right now. We're at MSNBC right here at Democracy Plaza at Rockefeller Center, as I said. It's been a long night. The President of the United States, for those who woke up, is one short of a necessary 270 electoral votes to win the presidency, and he's one short because there's 7 or so states right now that simply haven't gotten a clear fix on who won. They're too close to call, and that includes big states like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa. It also includes small states like New Hampshire and Nevada and New Mexico, and it's the reason why, look at the numbers are what they are, 211 and 269. Clearly the president is very close to clutching victory here. He's very close to nailing it down. And you can see the states that are still in contention. They're only in contention. All the voting's done. It's the counting that goes on. And the counting is slow and it's repetitive because these guys are staying close together. Nothing is changing. As many times as they keep counting, the numbers stay very close together. We've got Craig Crawford here right now. Craig, save me, because there's always something new to learn from these votes. And one thing I think we're going to look at, and that's that map. It seems to me that if this election for president is concluded, it is a lesson because of its predictable redundancy. The bottom of this country, anywhere where people speak in a Southern accent, by that I mean all the Confederate states of the old Confederacy and all the border states. I mean West Virginia. I mean Missouri, Southern Ohio. When any people have even the slightest drawl, the slightest Southern accent, they vote Republican. And can you win in a country where that's a fact? Well, you're a Democrat, and they vote against you every time.
Well, when the Democrats nominate a Southerner, they have a better shot. In fact, with Clinton and Gore, it helps to have 2 on the ticket. But I don't think you have to have a Southerner or a Southern accent. It's sort of intangible, but you know, the clues that people take in the South and in rural areas throughout the country on cultural issues, I don't think Democrats have to go all the way to the right on some of the gods, guns, and gays issue if they can at least show an appreciation for their culture. People in the South and people in rural areas feel very insecure. They feel like others outside in the urban areas are looking down on them. And somebody like Kerry communicates that.
Pat, it's just part of our cowboy culture, meaning, remember the guy in all the Westerns we grew up with, the guy from the East, the guy with the hat and the suit, was called the Dude.
Right.
He was the Dude. The Dude was not the good guy.
Never was.
The good guy was the Saudi buster.
Right.
So is this part of our culture that the guy, the Eastern guy with the good clothes and the windsurf going on and the wealthy wife, and he's just the dude?
But Jack Kennedy dispelled that. I mean, Jack Kennedy was a PT boat commander. He was a rich guy, but he went out there and went to war. He was a cold warrior. He got to Nixon's right on Cuba, and he could do it because he was not a liberal. The problem is, frankly, it is if they're perceived as social liberals and part of the cultural, social, moral revolution of the 60s. If they moved in that vein rather than traditional America, which is separating, they got a real tough time speaking to it, and it gets tougher every year.
Is this lesson going to be, they say the definition of an addiction is to do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Dukakis, Mondale. I mean, here we go again. It just seems like that every time they run a liberal from the north, that person is beaten. And this goes back to Adlai Stevenson. It's fairly consistent.
John Kerry can go into the middle of the country, can go into these rural areas that we've been talking about, and he can speak to these people's economic interests.
Absolutely.
He can actually be talking about things that are in their interest, but it comes off as patronizing, and they will reject him because they feel they're being patronized.
But this Kerry campaign made a decision to just abandon the South, and they even left people on the sidelines, like you've met Mudcat Saunders and Steve Jarding,
who could have been campaign advisors.
They left those guys on the sidelines. These are experts, Democratic Party experts in rural vote, and they left them on the sidelines.
They also made a decision to focus on Iraq. And
that was Mark Warner's campaign manager. That's the reason there's a Democratic governor of Virginia.
Absolutely. Mark Warner is somebody who won the rural vote, and the first Democrat in 50 years to win the rural vote.
On Mark Warner, they also rejected his appeals to stay in the state, to stay with advertising money, because he felt they could be competitive in Virginia.
There was a change.
They abandoned Virginia. But in terms of the issues that they focused on, they kept picking up the economic issues and then abandoning them. The Iraq, explosives issue erupted, and they seized it. Kerry seized it, ran with it, thought that was helping. But as we've seen from the polling, Iraq did not really help.
Another disillusion.
It may be that the Democrats have to take a sort of Chinese perspective on things. In other words, look to the long term. One of the things I think bothers people in these rural areas is not so much the snooty Easterner, but the sense that they don't really stand for anything. People admire people, even if they disagree with them, who stand for something. And the Democratic Party has not stood for anything for a long,
I think the Democratic Party has to do some very serious rethinking.
Awfully good job on both these. The Massachusetts liberal, and as you say, he doesn't stand for anything. He flips, he flops, the windsurfer, he's back, he's forth, all of that. They did a good job on it. Frankly, if it weren't for that first debate, where Kerry was outstanding and the president conducted the worst debate I've ever seen, this could have been a blowout.
You're so right about the Democrat. I mean, look at it. I mean, here's a party that is a minority in the House, a minority in the Senate, out of the White House, possibly. The Supreme Court, nowhere. I mean, how long can a party be completely out of power before they have to start from the ground up?
Really? I think they should start with universal health care, frankly. I think that's an issue. Right now, people say, oh, you can't do that. Not now, you can't. But in 4 years or 8 years, universal health care is something that needs to happen.
Let's take a look at something developing in South Dakota. Again, someone has made a victory speech who doesn't have the confirmation or the corroboration of NBC News. How dare they? But look at this. We're looking at where we stand looking at this. 99% of precincts reporting 7,000 votes separating the two gentlemen, with John Thune, the challenger, in the lead. He made a statement of a victory. And let's take a look at that now.
I think we got it's a little early in the morning, but I think everybody's got a little celebrating to do. And I'll tell you what else. Since the last several months, day and night and day, 24/7, we've been out, and many of you have too, working on this campaign. And when you finally get to the finish line, it's like, relief, and especially when you get an outcome like this one. But I have not done some things that I normally do this time of year, and so I've got a date with my 12 gauge in a cornfield coming up here real soon. and I can't wait to get out there. Thank you all very much. God bless you. God bless this great state and this great country. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, that's connected to the culture.
Well, there's a state that NBC News has not called. It's, but we have. Well, let's take a look at this. Minnesota. Here's one we have just called. NBC projects that when all the votes are counted, there a lot of them have been counted. John Kerry will carry Minnesota, a usually Democratic state, which was in jeopardy for a while today, or throughout the last couple of weeks of this campaign. We're looking right now at the map as it continues to fill out, and of course Minnesota there, another blue one up top there, but not enough. 221 electoral votes for John Kerry, the Democratic challenger, 269, one shy of 270 for the president, in what looks to be a beautiful map here with unusual gray shadings around the extremities here in the lower southwest, and of course the upper Great Lakes states of Minnesota, Wisconsin. Minnesota's now taken Wisconsin.
Eighth straight.
You know what Kerry's got to do?
Straight presidential campaign that Minnesota's gone Democratic, I believe.
You know what Kerry's got to do? There are 6 states left with 48 electoral votes. He's got to get every single one of them. Then he's got to have 2/3 of the provisional votes in Ohio accepted, and he's got to get every one of them. Yeah. That's how he wins.
It's tough.
But if he wins them all, and if he wins all,
okay, let's talk about.
But if he wins everything that's left, we get 269, 269.
Right? Let's allow, with some humility, the fact that John Thune and his campaign may be right in assuming the fact they won and defeated the incumbent United States Senator from South Dakota, Tom Daschle. I watched that debate on Tim Russert's show. It was a good debate, and Daschle did his best to attack against the realities, the ideological realities of his state. It's a very conservative state. It went early, as we saw tonight. It is a challenge. You know, you wonder, Pat, whether people really want to be a senator from a state that doesn't agree with them. No matter how hard you serve it, you do end up, it seems to me, getting defeated in the end. So many Western Democrats have been beaten on ideology.
South Dakota, nobody's made it past 4 terms in South Dakota, I don't believe.
But Senator George McGovern, whatever you say, he was maybe been elected 50-50, but he became something of an historic figure.
But then he finally got booted.
Oh, sure. Well, look, he got beat by, what was it, Abner? What was his name?
Yeah, it could have been Abner.
Yeah, Abner. Yeah, he got beat by Abner, but he came out of there and he voted, okay, 100% liberal, but he became a historic figure. I mean, to achieve that, it's quite an accomplishment. There's no doubt about it.
Well, we are within reach of the 269 tie, are we
sure,
not?
No, except
if the rest of these states go.
Except you got Nevada and Iowa, Nevada, and New Mexico are all tilting toward the president. Right. I think last night.
Well, let's watch that. Let's watch that as we leave right now to go to break, in the commercial break. That is such an illustrative situation, because you basically, if you're a true believing Democrat tonight, as you go to bed, and even at this late date in the morning, late time in the morning, you look at those states and you say, if all those white states become blue states, we have a tie, which means the House of Representatives gets to decide this thing, which means the Republican candidate gets elected by other means.
Yeah.
Well, unless they can buy off some electors, right?
Yeah, well, that's unlikely.
The electors could always switch their votes.
That is even less likely than the fact that John Kerry will carry all those white states. We'll be right back after this from Democracy Plaza for MSNBC. All right, here we are back at, look at how pretty it is tonight. It still looks like that. We got a few late night hawks out there behind me, but that doesn't bother us. Look at this beautiful building. By the way, we're looking at this red tapestry, this, I keep trying to figure out the right word for it, this piece of material that keeps going. Election ribbon, well said, somebody did, because all I did, see how it so cloyingly doesn't quite reach the top. It gets to 269, which isn't enough for 270. And of course, on the other side, the Democratic challenger is not quite doing so well on this wall climbing exercise tonight. But here it is at quarter to 5 in the morning, and the interesting thing is that everybody has stopped counting ballots. Andrea, we haven't heard from you in a while. It seems to me that we're waiting to hear, everybody's hoping to hear from perhaps Nevada, one of these states, because all it takes is one more to give the president his 270. And at that magic moment, I expect that the Reagan building in Washington will come alive.
Even at that hour, the president would go over there and declare victory. I think they are very eager to seize that initiative and put
And
the challenger on the defensive.
ritualistic importance of the president standing in front of the room and commanding the victory is what?
I am the leader. I am the president. I am the incumbent. I am the re-elected commander-in-chief.
A picture for the ages.
Absolutely.
And for the international editions of all the newspapers from Rangoon to Rio de Janeiro, they need a picture.
Live
they can't go to bed
around the world.
because they're all in different cycles than we are. They have different editorial deadlines.
But you remember in 2000, neither one of them spoke to their crowds. Neither Bush or Gore. They left the crowds to themselves. They never talked to them.
But if there were no chance of his coming over there, they would dismiss that crowd.
Yeah.
These are their supporters, and they would let them go home. Clearly, someone may speak to that crowd if they get one more state.
And they will. They will, probably. I mean, New Mexico, Nevada, they'll call it for him eventually. I mean, an hour from now. We might not be here.
Let's admit that in our latest numbers, New Mexico is moving in the direction that Bill Richardson, the governor,
That's
predicted.
true. Nevada.
New Mexico was creeping within 2,000 votes.
Yeah.
What did the president pick up tonight that he didn't get last time? What states?
Well, he first of all,
what did he accomplish tonight in terms of building a mandate?
the popular vote.
Yes, but what states? Did he not, in fact, do what Charles Rove recommended he do, which is to exploit further the communities and the parts of the country that supported you before? In other words, he didn't enlarge his mandate of leadership. He enlarged the turnout among the people who naturally like him for cultural reasons.
And I was talking to a top member of the Bush-Cheney team back in August who said to me, we are going to compete head-to-head on the ground with the Democrats. We have been working on it. We are organized. And he said, we're going to be there, and you're going to see a turnout by Republicans, by our base.
Here's your point. If you take Bush's states, he had 278 electoral votes. He has not gotten Nevada, and he has not gotten New Hampshire. That's -9. That takes him to 269 where he's at right now. He has not picked up, I don't believe, a single blue state.
No, and in fact, Kerry looks like he'll poach New Hampshire, which was a red state last time.
Looking good in New Mexico and Iowa.
Well, New Mexico's moving back, though, towards Kerry.
But he hasn't picked up one yet.
Isn't that interesting? In other words, he may well win this election based on the Democratic shift to the Sun Belt. The fact that the Sun Belt, the states of the South and the Southwest have gotten more electoral votes now than they had 4 years ago, just by geographic shift.
Yes, he's picked up, for example, Florida has given him 2 more votes out of Florida. Arizona, I think, has got 1 or 2 more.
Yes.
1 or 2 more. Nevada's got 1 or 2 more. Of course, he hasn't got that yet.
Yeah, it's
That's
somewhere
exactly
around
right.
10.
Let's go now to where the battle is being waged right now in Cleveland, Ohio. Chris Chansing's there greeting and recognizing at least the arrival of the Kerry legal team, the best in the business, they're called. Let me go back to Chris Chansing in Cleveland. Chris.
Hi there, Chris. Well, the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections has been closed up for a couple of hours. The votes have all been counted, but the questions about the ballots, of course, are lingering out there. And I talked to an advisor to the Kerry campaign who told me that there was a plane filled with what he described as the best of the best lawyers that this country has, and that they are already on the ground in Ohio. In fact, from my estimation, by the time the Secretary of State here, Ken Blackwell, was giving out the estimates about the number of provisional ballots that many of these lawyers will be looking at, they were already here. Clearly an indication that this is something the Kerry campaign had anticipated. They had people in place ready to go, ready to be dispatched to whatever state it was that they were needed, and that state is Ohio. I couldn't get a number of how many lawyers they were, and it's going to be interesting to see how they work, because provisional ballots here in Ohio are counted the same way as other ballots are. So the ones that are done here in Cuyahoga County are counted here in Cuyahoga County. Same with those in Franklin County, which is where Columbus is. So this is something that's going to be spread out all across the state. But when I asked this Kerry advisor, do you really think you have a chance to win, or is this really more about making the statement that we heard from John Edwards, which is, we want to guarantee that every vote is counted? He said to me, oh no, we believe we have a real chance here, or we wouldn't move forward. Chris?
Well, is the chance that you see that, or they see that you've observed, is it that that they can get a victory in the first count, that they can get a victory once the provisional ballots are applied? How do they see this victory occurring?
They see this as a numbers game, and clearly they're looking at numbers maybe that we're not exactly seeing. They're saying there are provisional ballots yet. There are obviously overseas ballots. There are military ballots that are yet to be counted. My clear question here, if they have all these lawyers and they've been looking at this and they have been preparing for this, is there some other area of challenge that we don't maybe see yet or that we don't understand? That's not something that was offered in the equation to me. So I think we're back to what you've been talking about all night, is that the numbers would sure seem to favor the president, that it would take some extraordinary number of percentages of these provisional ballots, overseas ballots, military ballots going John Kerry's way for him to legitimately have a chance. But that's what they're telling me, that they would not move forward with this if they didn't think they legitimately had a chance, if they weren't looking at the numbers and the numbers didn't say to them, we can still win Ohio.
Well, we're looking at a big differential there. You saw it, about, what, 160,000 vote difference?
145.
140, well, you're right, okay, 145,000 votes. That's a lot of votes to make up in a recount, isn't it? Just a minute, I'll stay there, Chris. Isn't it, Pat?
Oh, yeah, it's if there's only, if there's these provisional ballots of 200,000 or 175,000, how do you make up 145,000 again? All the provisional ballots have to be accepted, and you got to beat the guy about 5 or 6 to 1.
And a question that I would have for Chris is also, what about the absentee ballots, Chris? And what about those alternate ballots that were given to people who were told that they could fill out these substitute paper ballots? Are those also to be counted? And do they wait 10 days before counting them, or do they count them right away?
That's a good question, and it's a question I had for elections officials, and I'll tell you, they're a little befuddled by this as well. They're very focused now on these provisional ballots, and they said, they actually handed me a book, and then we had to leave. They handed me the book of election law, and I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know the specifics of this, and I couldn't get the specifics of it, but they said that there are other sets of ballots out there. We don't have the numbers on those. The only numbers that I have, for example, on the military ballots, or on the overseas ballots, are for Cuyahoga County. So the Kerry campaign, again, must see some numbers in these other ballots that we may not have yet.
I mean, they insist to us as well that they think that they've got a mathematical game they can play. But as Chris was just pointing out, this could be a symbolic gesture. This could be something for the Democratic base. As John Edwards said, we promise you we will insist that every vote be counted.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Chris Chansing out there in Cleveland, Ohio, which looks like it's going to be the next Miami-Dade of our lives, the next soap opera, because politically, I certainly sense, having talked to Democrats, that they don't like what happened 4 years ago, and they want to see a fight. They don't like the idea of a laydown. I mean, gentlemen may like a laydown, but the Democrats don't like giving it away when they think they've got it. But the thing is here, Pat, there's a big difference between this and everybody. 4 years ago, Al Gore won, it turned out, the popular vote by 500,000 votes, and he didn't really contest. Here you have a situation where the guy who won the initial balloting by 3 million votes. It's kind of hard to go up to him without that moral strength of saying, hey, wait a minute, buddy, I get the most votes. I got at least the right to argue this thing. The senator from Massachusetts has to fight this thing, saying, I know I'm going to lose the popular vote by 3 million votes, but I want to try to win this state.
Well, here's the thing. You not only got the 3 million votes, Al Gore lost Florida by 500 votes or something like that. 3,000 of them were in Palm Beach County, the butterfly ballot, and you had a bunch of spoiled ballots, and you had clear cases of individuals claiming they'd been disfranchised. You had a lot of good moral arguments there, and if dependent upon whether the president gets one more state, you don't have the strength of those arguments. Now you have sort of a desperate chance to overturn what looks like a pretty clear Bush victory in Ohio.
And don't forget, most of the balloting in Ohio was with the old punch card system that we saw in Florida and the Chads, and we haven't even gotten to that stage yet of some of the spoiled ballots that have been thrown out that'll be challenged. So we could be looking at Chads again in Ohio.
Yes.
But as we were told, Ohio actually has a system to determine what is a real Chad, what is a valid Chad, and what is a three-cornered Chad.
I'll be anxious. I'll be curious to see that.
But you know, we're not really arguing about miscount here, are we?
No, not yet.
It's different.
No.
We're not arguing about
Not
whether
yet.
people were unfairly disenfranchised
Exactly.
because
No,
their Chad was 2/3 or 3/4 rather, and we're not really arguing about
This is
that.
undercount.
There are votes that haven't been counted yet. The provisional ballots just haven't been counted yet.
It seems to me that when they're looking at, let's take a look at the Bush headquarters of the party tonight and see if there's as much pride. This is what I like. I knew this was coming. People are actually lying on the floor.
They look like we feel.
This looks like one of these refugee centers that people they're very well dressed, of course. But look, they've
Coming out
just
of a
given
war
up
zone.
waiting. I mean, they've been waiting for
Godot.
that's right, for all these hours for the president to make an appearance. But they must have known this was going to be a close election. You have to realize a lot of these people showed up at this party just around 12 X many hours ago, when it looked like the president was going to lose the election. These are the stalwarts who went in here thinking their guy was going to lose. The president of the United States was going to take a fall tonight, and there they are taking a fall themselves.
That's a fall. Right.
Look at this. This is going to be one of those Life magazine pictures of the year.
I don't see his chest going up and down.
Oh my!
Let's enjoy these pictures here. They're look at these. Everybody's going home. Look at this. That is your. We'll be right back with more Life Than That when we come back. We'll be back from Rockefeller Center in just a moment after this. We're still waiting to see if there's going to be a final call for a state tonight that will activate a presidential celebration. We'll be right back.
Do you have plain, ordinary lips or vertical lines that give away your age? Tried crazy contraptions or considered collagen injections to make them look fuller and younger? Well, now you can have those plump, younger, sexy lips you've always dreamed of with new Dream Lips from the Salon Shop. The revolutionary lip plumping and line smoothing serum that's scientifically proven to increase the size of your lips and reduce age lines.
Dream Lips is a phenomenal product. My lips have increased in size dramatically, and they're so plump and luscious looking.
I can't believe the difference. I now have sexy, smooth, luscious lips, and I owe it all to Dream Lips.
Dream Lips has not only made my lips softer and far more defined, it even got rid of my age lines.
As we get older, lips become thinner and lines form. Dream Lips formulation contains a clinically proven ingredient that stimulates natural collagen production, causing lips to increase in size. And vitamin B's erase fine lines for younger, smoother looking lips.
I give Dream Lips to my patients who don't want the pain or expense of collagen lip injections. It's a clinically proven, safe, and effective way to dramatically increase lip volume and diminish fine lines associated with aging.
Call now and we'll send you the remarkable Dream Lips Plumping Serum and the Nighttime Intensive Serum that plumps and smooths out lines while you sleep. Both for only $14.95. There's more. We'll also send you this conditioning lip gloss for shiny, sexy lips. A $20 value free. But wait, call right now and get this amazing 5x magnification lighted mirror. A $35 value, yours free. Altogether, that's a $75 value, yours for only $14.95. This offer is not available in stores. Call now.
Call 1-800-591-8582 to order Dream Lips and get the lip gloss and 5x magnification mirror for free. For plump, sexy lips, that's 1-800-591-8582. Have your credit card or checkbook ready and call 1-800-591-8582.
Are you flustered? Well... Are you at a loss for words? Don't worry. Chris Matthews has that effect on a lot of people.
Did he think the reason for the war was a connection to 9/11?
But the test,
We don't call it hardball for nothing.
No, I want you to complete that thought.
Hardball with Chris Matthews, 7 p.m. Eastern, MSNBC. Somewhere between the left and the right is the heart of America. That's where you'll find Joe Scarborough.
What should Americans do to fix this problem and change the law?
As a lawyer, newspaper publisher, and congressman, he's never been afraid to stand up for regular Joes everywhere.
We should show Saddam Hussein no mercy.
Now, Joe's speaking up on MSNBC.
It sounds like a taxpayer ripoff to me.
He's proving that a regular Joe can still make a difference. Scarborough Country, weeknights at 10, MSNBC.
When our sons and daughters find themselves in harm's way, America's watching MSNBC. When heroes rise, When the world is rocked by winds of change, America's watching MSNBC. Whether it happens on the other side of the globe or right next door, turn to the nation's most trusted news source. America's watching MSNBC.
It's been a long night, but we've waited 4 years for this victory. We can wait one more night. John Kerry and I made a promise to the American people that in this election, every vote would count and every vote would be counted.
Well, there's the beautiful Rockefeller Center at Democracy Plaza, and we just heard the anthem of the Democratic ticket. We waited 4 years for this victory, and we can wait one more night. We're joined right now by Amy Robach and, of course, by Randy Myers, sitting to me so fresh as daisy, so clean,
well, you know,
so spirited. They're joining Andrea and Pat and I. You know, we have to tell you what's been going on.
Well, we've been watching a little bit.
There was this election.
Well, there we have. We had this election, which was
we got a couple states still in play.
And, it was close. But the president won by about 3 million popular votes, which is substantial. And, of course, he didn't quite get the 270, so we're going to leave it to you, all of us here on this side of the table, to try to hope for that 270 before you go to bed.
Yeah, one
tonight.
to go, huh?
That would be nice. One, I think it could be what Nevada we're looking at as a possible
Nevada,
turn.
New Mexico, or Iowa.
Yeah, and so the votes the presidents are leading in those three states. Pat's been doing the recording here for us.
Michigan is still out there.
And he's up in Iowa, right? He's
Bush is up in Iowa.
So let's take a look at where we're at for those getting up to go to work this morning. We're smart enough to go to bed around 11 last night, getting in 8 hours here. Let's take a look at the map of the United States. That's a very familiar map. It looks a lot like 4 years ago. The reds, of course, are the states won by the president, the heartland, the prairie states, the South, the Bible Belt, Texas. Really a successful run for him. No new states picked up. No new states to pick up. And the blue states, well, they're less than the blue states 4 years ago, but they could well end up being the same states the way it's going right now. Let's take a look at the, Okay, and now you guys go.
And how is it that New Hampshire is still not in play there? There we go. Too close to call for President. Michigan, 90% of the votes in. The vote difference there, just 103,000 votes. John Kerry with 2.1. George Bush with 2.09. Very close there.
Also too close to call at this hour. Wisconsin with 99% in. That vote difference just 13,293. John Kerry with the slight edge there.
And still looking at those states, too close to call. Iowa, though, it's getting very close. 99% in the vote difference there. Just 14,000 votes in the state of Iowa separating George Bush and John Kerry.
Also too close at this hour, the state of Nevada with 99% in the vote difference, just over 20,000. The president with that lead, 20,505 votes at this hour.
And hanging on by a thread, the state of New Mexico, 99% in, but still, I know it sounds like a broken record. Too close to call. The vote difference only 10,000 in New Mexico.
Also, New Hampshire still too close to call at this hour with 95% in. The vote difference there, very similar to the others, just over 10,000 votes separating Senator Kerry and President George W. Bush.
And now we look at the map right now to see where the action is. These are the green states, a new category of states for us all. There you have Nevada, New Mexico, and you have the Great Lakes states up top there, Iowa and Wisconsin. And Michigan, a big surprise. Michigan's still in play right now. Let's go right now to Nora Donna, who's also still at work, and she's covering the White House and the entire Bush campaign. Nora, what's happening right now?
Good morning. Hey,
I love
top
your
of the
laugh.
morning
Go ahead,
to
let's
you,
go.
Chris. Top of the
It's
morning.
good. We're all working all night here.
Well, they are burning the midnight oil here at the White House. Very unusual for a president who likes to go to bed early. The lights still on here at the White House, and they are still waiting at the Ronald Reagan building, where they have been waiting for the president to come address them. There are pictures from inside the Ronald Reagan building of many of those waiting for the president who are stretched out on the ground, sleeping now. They had perhaps hoped for an earlier evening. Well, now they are, some of them, the crowd's thinning out a bit. There are some still standing there, but there are others who are just clearly passed out on the floor. But obviously great supporters still waiting for the president. The news, of course, is that this campaign, this White House says they are ready to declare victory. They are ready to declare victory once they get over 270. So they are waiting on calls in New Mexico and in Nevada. Then they say after that point, the president will be ready to go over to the Ronald Reagan building and make this speech. Somewhat a bit of defiance from this White House, despite the fact that Senator Kerry has not yet conceded this race because of problems in Ohio, problems that the Bush-Cheney campaign says would not vault Kerry into a victory once those provisional ballots are counted. It's interesting, the president, the last time we saw him was probably now over 7.5 hours ago. It was 9:30 Eastern time in the White House residence when he allowed reporters in, took some brief questions, said he was feeling great, said he was going to win this race, and that he thought it would be over tonight. The president was there with his close family, his daughters, his wife, his father, and Barbara Bush. It was interesting. I ran into the 41st president, former President Bush, and I asked him, how are you doing? And he said, well, I'm doing better now. And that was because there was quite a roller coaster of a day. They had gotten some early exit poll numbers that were bad. Then the actual results started rolling in. They started feeling better. Then the president appearing for the cameras. And now here's where we are, where the mood of celebration has turned to what my colleague David Gregory has called irritation, as they want this to be over. And in fact, the Bush-Cheney campaign has released just one statement tonight. That statement is from the two Republican senators from Ohio who are saying that based on their experience in Ohio politics, we believe that the president's lead in Ohio is clear and that it cannot be surmounted. Senators DeWine and Voinovich saying, quote, Senator Kerry should concede defeat and spare the country the turmoil of another drawn-out election. Chris?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Norah O'Donnell at the White House. It's getting a little dumpy. Anyway, thank you very much. Great report. It looks like they're going to try to intimidate the Democratic challenger into some sort of a perhaps premature concession. He's not going to do it.
That's what the Democrats are saying. The Kerry people are absolutely firm that they are not going to concede. They don't think all the votes have been counted, and they will not concede Ohio.
Okay, Patrick Buchanan.
They shouldn't concede until the president goes over 269. The president hasn't won the presidency.
But they've got that grand jury over there waiting at the Reagan building. They're impaneled, and it seems like they're going to keep them there until they've got something to say.
You know, Chris, I wonder why, though. Maybe has anyone else called any of these states? Some of these states look like, under normal conditions, if you hadn't had Florida, they would have been called for Kerry or for Bush.
Right.
I mean, Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin for Kerry, and the other three.
You think they're going to make a call to Fox and get the day rolling here?
No, they clearly know. They know more than we know about where these votes are.
Chris. I know it's getting late, but you know, truth does win out anyway.
In the end.
I turn it over to you, my young brethren.
All right.
Seize the day.
Rest. Wonderful job.
Seize
to
the
all
day.
of you. Great
Yes.
job. All right. Well, you mentioned the Kerry campaign. They are standing by with hopes that the Ohio vote totals will still come in their favor.
That's right. NBC's James Nattori is at the Kerry Edwards campaign with the latest from there. Are they saying anything, James?
Amy, they've imposed what they call a full lid, meaning that there is no further official word from the campaign in these early morning hours. But you can bet there aren't a lot of people getting sleep or rest at the Kerry campaign headquarters, or for that matter, probably the Kerry residents. They're undoubtedly checking with their people in the field in Ohio and other states to get the latest information as to vote counts and what they might mean to the candidacy of John Kerry. Now, Senator Kerry has been in his residence on Beacon Hill in Boston for much of the night and early morning hours. He did not make an appearance at a rally that was staged just outside here in front of the Boston Public Library. The only person who did come out and address the crowd earlier this morning was Senator John Edwards, who made a very brief appearance before the assembled crowd, and by that point, of course, many of the people in the rally had a sense of what was going on. His remarks were very short and to the point, saying that they had waited 4 years to come to this point and that they would wait one more day to make sure every vote was counted. Here's some of what he had to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's been a long night, but we've waited 4 years for this victory. We can wait one more night. Tonight, John and I are so proud of all of you who are here with us and all of you across the country who have stood with us in this campaign. John Kerry and I made a promise to the American people that in this election, every vote would count and every vote would be counted. Tonight, we are keeping our word, and we will fight for every vote. You deserve no less. Thank you.
Again, no further word from Kerry advisors except an email was sent to reporters saying that what Senator Edwards says represents the stand of the campaign at this point. They say they may have further word tomorrow, perhaps. That's today, rather. I'm sorry, it already is today. Perhaps in a few hours, for that matter. But we'll have to wait and see. Randy?
All right, NBC's James Satori in Boston for us. Thank you very much, James. Appreciate it. And it is today.
That's right. It's hard for many people to believe who've been up all night long, but last presidential election, certainly we saw all eyes on Florida. As things are shaping up now, all eyes on Ohio at this hour.
MSNBC's Chris Jansing is in Cleveland, Ohio right now, where Ohio's vote totals are still coming in, and the Kerry campaign still clinging to hope that it would turn in their favor. Chris?
Thanks very much, Amy and Randy. Yeah, I talked to a top Kerry campaign advisor who told me they wouldn't be doing this if they didn't think the numbers were in their favor. Bob Bennett is the chairman of the Republican Party here, as well as Cuyahoga's election official. He's been kind enough to stand out in the cold with me, and after what has been a very long night for everybody. Do you see a scenario under which John Kerry could get enough votes under these provisional ballots and potentially squeak by and take Ohio?
The election is over in Ohio and George Bush has won, and he's carried the state by approximately 150,000 votes. And even if there's 150 or 70,000 provisional ballots out there, I think that it's very naive to expect that he would get enough votes. Traditionally, in Ohio election, the provisional ballots follow along the same percentages as the vote totals. And
so even with overseas ballots and military ballots, which also are yet to be counted.
Absolutely. I think it's very, it would be a great stretch of the imagination to feel that this election would turn around in Ohio. It's just not going to happen. We had the closest election in Ohio's history in 1990 in our Attorney General's race. I think the election night totals are somewhere under 3,000 votes for the winner. The winner ended up winning that race after 3.3 million votes were cast by 1,234 votes. So we're pretty good at counting on election night, and the votes that are counted after they come in on the overseas and the provisionals follow the same percentages as the...
There are some ballots to be counted that are unusual. That's because a judge, when he heard that there were such long lines in some places, 3, 5, even 7 hours in Knox County, said they could be given paper ballots to fill out so they wouldn't have to continue to wait in line. You're telling me that those votes are not part of this 10-day, 11-day recount. They would have already been counted.
No. The law in Ohio requires you to count all the ballots once you start counting them. The only ones you don't count are the provisional ballots because they have to be checked against the registration records at the Board of Elections. But every ballot that was cast yesterday at the precinct level has been counted and turned into the Secretary of State.
Now, both of the Republican senators, U.S. senators from Ohio, have issued a statement, and they have said essentially John Kerry should concede, that he should not put the United States, should not put the country through another protracted election. What do you think about that statement?
Well, I think as the chairman of the Ohio Republican Party, I agree with the senators on that statement. As chairman of the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections, Senator Kerry is entitled to ask for a recount if he's within the margin of error. He's entitled to have witnesses, observers when the official count is being made. I think most of the boards would accommodate him. He can do whatever he wants, but the result's not going to change.
There's some frustration that lingers from 4 years ago. People who felt that maybe their vote wasn't counted and that the Democrats maybe feel some sort of responsibility to those people. In fact, that's essentially what John Edwards said tonight, to make sure every vote is counted.
Well, first of all, Ohio is not Florida. We have bipartisan board of elections here. We have 2 Democrat, 2 Republican members that sit on every board. We have a balance within the board employees at every board of elections. It's an equal number of Democrats and Republicans. It's a checks and balance. We know how to count hanging chads, pregnant chad, dimpled chads in Ohio, and we do a pretty good job of counting votes in Ohio, and I think that starts right at the Secretary of State level and goes all the way down to our 88 county boards of elections.
Well, thank you very much for staying out here, and I know it's been a long night for you, Bob Bennett. You're ready to go home, get some sleep. Thank you so much for being with us. We were reporting this earlier. There is a team of lawyers that the Kerry campaign describes as the best of the best who's been brought into Ohio. We may hear more after they do their analysis tomorrow. Certainly they will be in touch with the Kerry campaign, and then we'll see what we hear from them sometime when the sun comes up later on today. Amy, Randy, back to you.
All right, Chris Jansen in Cleveland, Ohio, a state still in play, at least in the Democrats' view at this hour.
Also another big swing state that a lot of folks were looking at as we headed into this election night, and now we're, of course, into the morning hours, is Wisconsin. We want to head out to NBC's Martin Savage, who is there in Madison with the latest for us.
10 electoral votes up for grabs there, Martin, and still up for grabs.
It still is, Randy and Amy. You're absolutely right. I mean, before the election began, before the voting took place, this was a state that was considered to be a toss-up. And now that 99% of the ballots have been counted, still considered to be a toss-up. Not exactly clear when the last 1% is going to be fully accounted for, and when finally we will know who will win. Senator Kerry is, though, leading by about 12 to 14,000 votes, so it is believed that he will probably win the state of Wisconsin, and that's not out of keeping with the Democratic tradition of the last 3 presidential elections. It was Clinton, and Gore, the way this state voted the 3 times previous, so it is expected to go Senator Kerry's way, but officially that has not happened as yet. Very heavy voter turnout, as was the case in many states across the nation. In fact, it is that heavy voter turnout that complicated some things, and there were some legal challenges that actually took place. Those were all resolved. They did not turn into bitter legal battles. So essentially, they say that the election here in the state of Wisconsin pretty much was problem-free. But 1% still waiting to be tallied. Back to both of you.
All right, Martin Savage with the latest for us. We appreciate that, Martin.
Another state still in play is New Mexico. New Mexico down there in the southwest, a state that President Bush believed he would carry. But again, and he is leading in New Mexico, we should say, by the latest polls, but it's still too close to call there.
That's right. NBC's Josh Makowitz is standing by where they are still counting the votes there in Santa Fe. Josh, what's the latest?
Well, the counting has gone on. The Secretary of State's office, which is where we are, they've gone home, and they're not expecting any more announcements until later this morning, perhaps even later than that. President Bush held a sizable lead here just a couple of hours ago, and with about 99% of the vote in, his lead has been cut as some late Democratic votes came in. The president was leading by like 30,000 votes just a couple of hours ago. That lead now been cut to about 11,000 votes, which just plays up the importance of what's now going on and what's going to be going on later today, which is the counting of thousands of absentee ballots. There were 191,000 absentee ballots issued in the state of New Mexico. When the Secretary of State's office left here a couple of hours ago to go home and get some sleep, they told us there were still 70,000 ballots that still had to be counted. So now that the race is down to about an 11,000 vote margin, you can see why 70,000 votes in absentee ballots could possibly be significant in the outcome. Add to that about another maybe 10,000 votes that are provisional ballots. It'll take some time to certify those and determine whether or not those are going to be added to the count and whether or not those whether those votes actually should be counted. So it's going to be a while before we know who won New Mexico. We should have some numbers later today. It'll be a while, though, before we have any final numbers. And with the race this close, we really might be in for a short wait here. Amy and Randy?
All right, Josh Makowitz with the latest from Santa Fe, New Mexico.
And here we are 20 minutes past 5 o'clock on the East Coast in the heart of New York City, Democracy Plaza. The presidential election still officially up in the air today as they continue to count those votes in 6 states around the country.
That's right. The president with 269, just short of the 270 needed to take the presidency. We'll be back after this break with our panel of experts to discuss the big state everyone's looking at this hour, Ohio. It's up for contention at this point. Democrats saying they're not giving it up just yet.
back to Democracy Plaza in the heart of Manhattan. It's a beautiful morning here in New York City. You can see the famous map now under the ice. Rockefeller Plaza showing the states won by President Bush, now at 28 in red, and the states won by John Kerry. Thus far, we believe about 17, and with the addition of Minnesota won by John Kerry. There's a run-through of how it shakes down in alphabetical order. As I stated, the president at this point winning 28 of those states.
None of these a surprise, no upsets so far. These are the same states that President Bush and Al Gore respectively won back in the 2000 election. And of course, we now have all eyes on 6 states that are still yet to be decided.
President Bush still 1 electoral vote away from that magical 270 number. He's sitting at 269. He needs to take, by most political estimations, Nevada, New Mexico, Iowa is in play right now, where President Bush is leading. Those 3 states he has a lead in. And there you go, John Kerry has won 17 of the states, also in alphabetical order.
Now, we should mention the Kerry-Edwards campaign still not giving up on Ohio, although NBC News has projected that the president has taken the state of Ohio. John Kerry, and we heard specifically from John Edwards, keeping the faith at this hour and hoping that those provisional ballots, absentee ballots still yet to be counted, could swing in their favor at this hour.
And there's how the electoral votes shake down right now. 270 needed to win. President Bush 1 shy at this hour at 269 officially. John Kerry at 221. It all hinges, at least by most political pundits' estimation, on Ohio officially going to President Bush, and then Nevada, New Mexico, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, New Hampshire, all still in play.
That's right. And right now we want to bring in our panel of experts to help talk about this Ohio situation at this hour. We have Rich Galen, Republican strategist. Thank you very much for joining us. Also, Jacques DeGraff, Democratic strategist and MSNBC analyst. And of course, Craig Crawford, our political analyst here for MSNBC.
Craig, let me start with you. We talked about this throughout the evening. What is it about Ohio right now that has the Democrats clinging to hope? And those are my words, because they would see it differently, right?
Could be denial, but they do think they have some votes out there that we're not seeing that make a difference, that get it so close that it's worth putting a bunch of lawyers on a plane at Logan Airport and flying them to Ohio. They're so far apart in the numbers that we're seeing, but they think in the provisional ballots, those are the ballots people cast if they weren't registered at the place they showed up on the rolls anyway, and they got to cast something. Those need to be counted.
Just very quickly, Craig, if we hadn't had Florida, would we even be discussing this in Ohio right now?
If we hadn't had
Florida in 2000, would we even be talking about this right now?
Probably not. Probably not.
And we actually are going to go to a break real quickly, but we'll get back to our panelists in just a moment. You're watching MSNBC here live on Democracy Plaza.
It's been a long night, but we've waited 4 years for this victory. We can wait one more night. John Kerry and I made a promise to the American people that in this election, every vote would count and every vote would be counted.
Past the hour on this, the morning after election night. I want to welcome all our NBC stations to Democracy Plaza in the heart of New York. I'm Randy Meyer, along with Amy Robach. Our coverage of election 2004, still up in the air, continues.
That's right, and all eyes right now on Ohio, one of the states that NBC News has called for President George W. Bush, but one that the Kerry and Edwards campaign are not willing at this hour to concede just yet. 6 other states still in play right now as we wait for those votes to be counted. We want to bring back in our panel of experts at this hour, Craig Crawford, Jacques DeGraff, and Rich Galen. Thank you all for being here today. Jacques, I want to ask you, as we talk about Ohio, clearly I think most people would agree that we certainly wouldn't want to, excuse me, I think we have another call at this hour right now.
There it is.
I believe now it looks like the president for the state of Michigan, it looks like, has gone to John F. Kerry, 51% of the vote. NBC News projecting now with more than 2.2 million votes. John Kerry takes Michigan at this hour with 51% of the vote.
One more goes up in the blue category for John Kerry, and there it is, 238 electoral votes for John Kerry, 269 for George Bush. Still watching very closely the western states of Nevada and New Mexico. And still, way out there on the East Coast, New Hampshire has not come in with an official winner in the state of New Hampshire as of yet. Of course, that's in John Kerry's backyard, his home state of Massachusetts, and that also a very, very close vote total at this time.
And Jacques, I was going to ask you in just a moment, we see just 269 electoral votes for the president. We do want to mention, though, before, as we go through some of these swing states still in play right now, New Hampshire with 95% of the vote in. Just a 10,388 vote difference between John Kerry and George Bush at this hour.
And in the state of, well, there's the total for electoral votes, 270, as we said, needed, 269 for President Bush, 238 for John Kerry, still up in the air. Still up in the air. And coming up, the final. Wisconsin, 99% in, but still too close to call in the state of Wisconsin. Only about 14,000 votes separating those two in the state of Wisconsin, 13,293 to be exact. Several states in this category at this hour, now down to just a handful, about 5 states, I believe, still up in the air in this election, but very important because they're all those key battleground states.
And Randy, they say third time's a charm, so I'm going to try to ask Jacques this question for the third time. See if any new information doesn't come in now. No, I want to talk about, as we talk about Ohio, most people would say that the Kerry Edwards ticket doesn't need to concede anything until the president reaches that 270 number. But you and I were talking about how this may be just bigger than Ohio. We could be talking really about the future of the Democratic Party and how they go forward from this point on. Do Democrats have to be very careful when it comes to challenging those votes in Ohio once all is said and done?
Well, the first issue is the concession issue. And after Florida, one of the first missteps that many people in the Democratic Party believe is that Al Gore conceded too soon. And so once you've made a concession, then to retract it and then to start a fight puts you in a difficult position. And so from the onset in Ohio, they're not going to concede early. Having said that, the question of how you conduct yourself there's one thing to fight a dignified battle, and it is another thing to be perceived as whining and losing, particularly when you have a number of first-time voters who now have got energized by the process, but see the side that they voted for losing and whining. It may cut the Democrats' opportunities for the future short. So they need to conduct the game plan, at least with a strategy to win, but also with an eye towards an exit strategy.
How long do they draw this out?
Well, draw it out as an emotional term, but I think that they have to conduct it in a dignified way, because for the public, this process has been going on since last January, and it's been hammering on, and so I think the public wants a swift resolution of this in any direction.
And Rich, as a Republican strategist, is it now the Republicans' move to just sit back and wait? I mean, they're feeling very comfortable at what's going on. Is it up to the Democrats to concede before the Republicans make a move?
No, I don't think so. I think Republicans wait a reasonable amount of time, frankly, until one of these other states come in, whether it's Iowa or Nevada or New Mexico. And as soon as the total exceeds 270, I think it's legitimate for the Republicans, especially the Bush campaign, to declare victory. And then the Kerry campaign can do whatever it wants. I agree with Jacques that the Kerry campaign is in a very precarious position here. The fact is that we have been talking about this since about midnight. And the fact is there are not enough votes out there to realistically change Ohio. And for the Kerry campaign to try to somehow manufacture a Florida-like event here, I think is a mistake.
Well, but at the same time, Rich, they shouldn't concede yet. I mean, the president doesn't have 270.
Until you hit 270, it's sort of pointless.
Until they hit 270. No, but the other dimension is this. Even though we may not see it, the Democrats are hearing from their people in Ohio that there's something there. And so,
yeah, but wouldn't you expect that, though? I mean,
but I'm saying, but you can't abandon your people in the field at this juncture.
Well, but what I'm saying is that when the president wins at least one of those 3 Western states, and it gets over to be 270, then
I'm saying you need some exploration within Ohio.
Well, you can do that, but as the only person on this panel, I guarantee you, who is actually an elected official from Ohio, I'm telling you, I once lost a race there.
Good enough for me.
900. That's the Trump card.
I lost one race, 902 to 900, then I won the second time I ran. So Ohioans are very careful about doing this stuff right. And what the election board commission from Columbus from Franklin County said is that it's very even-handed. There's 2 and 2 in every single of the 88 counties, and they take this stuff very seriously.
But the something there, Jacques mentioned, is I've talked to several people in the Kerry camp, and I've really pressed them, and I believe they are truly convinced they've got some sort of argument.
Well,
There's
I'm
something,
sure they
as
do,
you say,
there's-
something there.
It's also possible that an asteroid is going to hit us in the head.
Well, I mean, they are convinced they've got some votes out there that haven't been counted yet that are going to get this thing so close that
it has been sitting at 120, 130, 140,000.
Yeah, I agree. No, I don't see it either, but I'm just saying they really do believe it. I mean, they're not just saying.
Is there a realistic chance that we got to factor in New Mexico and Nevada here? Is there a realistic chance that Kerry could actually take one or either of those states?
Well,
I mean,
New Mexico got much closer. I mean, actually,
It is
of
down
all
to
the
10,000.
states that are remaining, Nevada's the only one where Bush leads. We are dangerously close to the 269
There it is right
tie.
there.
I mean, that was 30,000. Bush was ahead 30,000 not too long ago.
But what's the rush?
But the 269 tie is really within reach here.
No, it's not within reach. That's not likely to be.
Well, there's only one of those states where Bush,
Nevada,
right there is the one that could
only
keep us
reason
from it.
Nevada's not being called is because none of the networks wants to be the ones that puts. That is the one that puts the president over.
But I'm just saying that's the only state where Bush leads of the remaining states.
No,
which
that's
means,
not true. He leads in New Mexico.
And he leads in Iowa.
Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So of
but
those,
the New
of those
Mexico
three,
lead.
the only
has,
of the 3 states, the only state he leads in is all 3.
The trend line is in New Mexico is that no, in New Hampshire, Kerry leads in New Hampshire.
When Jacques said, "What's the rush?" though, my question is this: how long, arguably, will it take before all of these provisional and absentee ballots are actually
This thing is going to be over later this afternoon. I think everybody will take a look at what's out there. They're going to take a look at what's in. These other states will all be called, more or less, and the Kerry campaign will decide that it is too much of a pressure. Political pressure is too much, and they'll fold their tent and go out with like gentlemen.
Jacques, as the Democratic strategist in this scenario here, I want to ask you, are we having this conversation because of what happened in 2000 with Florida? Is everybody just walking on eggshells, very trepidatious about all of this because of history?
Everyone is looking at a precedent that is impacting on where we're going to go after this. We have to, one party or another is going to have to pick up the pieces after today. And so what I believe is that they are trying to take steps now that don't lock them in a box for the future.
All right, we want to thank our panelists who are sticking with us all day today. Jacques DeGroff right there, Rich Galen, and of course Craig Crawford. We'll be checking back in with you.
All right, we've got correspondents stationed all over the country right now as we watch these vote totals come in as well. NBC's Ann Thompson is in Columbus, Ohio. And Ann, we're hearing about the people voting late in Ohio causing at least some of the issues that we're discussing here tonight in terms of getting those votes counted. Is that what you're hearing?
Well, Randy, certainly. I mean, there were incredibly long lines in this state as Ohioans went out despite rainy weather, despite cold weather. They were absolutely determined to vote, and nowhere were they more determined to vote than in Knox County, where the last person voted at 3:55 this morning after standing in line for some 8 hours. It's really just been incredible. And because of those delays, I mean, the polls here closed at 7:30, but the state officials promised everybody who is in line would get a chance to vote. And that's some of what has held up these totals coming in.